One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 41-60. Chapter 41 Shaki's Strength. Are you Marine? Hearing Zhang Yang's words, Shaki frowned and looked at Zhang Yang, who didn't mean anything to me. Not only did the vigilance in his eyes not relax, but he became even more vigilant. Regardless of whether Zhang Yang's words are true or not, she decided that she must not let Zhang Yang leave easily today. She has been living with Rayleigh Sabayati Archipelago for more than 2 years. Marine also knows that Rayleigh is on the island, but because of not knowing the exact location and other reasons, he has not bothered them. But if Marine knew the exact location of Rayleigh, it's different. Although Marine may not really try his best to catch Rayleigh, but there will always be a lot of trouble, and they will even be forced to leave here. Since Zhang Yang said that he is Marine, if Zhang Yang can find it here, can other Marines also find it? If Zhang Yang is not Marine, what does he have to do with Rayleigh? That's what Shaki has in mind. No way, Rayleigh's identity is too sensitive, and she doesn't want to lose this peaceful life. Shaki can only be vigilant. Although Zhang Yang didn't know what Shaki was thinking, he probably guessed a little bit. He spread out his hands to show that he was really not malicious, and said helplessly, "First, I'm indeed Marine, but I have said it before, this time I came to Rayleigh too. My personal wishes have nothing to do with Marine, so let's sit down and have a good chat, okay?" Shaki ignored Zhang Yang's words and exuded a powerful aura. "How did you find this place?" "Of course it's from the anime." Zhang Yang muttered to himself in his heart. "This is a secret, there is no comment, but you don't have to worry, although I can find this place, it is impossible for other Marines," Zhang Yang said seriously. Shaki's eyes flickered for a moment, as if he was thinking about the credibility of what Zhang Yang said. Bang! The floor was directly overturned by Shaki's foot. Shaki looked at Zhang Yang with sharp eyes and said, "I can't fully believe what you said, so before Rayleigh comes back, please stay here obediently." Swish! As soon as the words fell, Shaki's figure moved, and the whole person came to Zhang Yang almost instantly, and kicked out again with a powerful kick. Armament hockey. Zhang Yang's eyes were slightly cold, and at a glance, he saw that Shaki used armament hockey for this foot. Sure enough, being able to open a bar in such an undisguised area is not an ordinary relationship with Rayleigh. The original book seems to have said that she used to be a big pirate. The strength of this Shaki is really not simple. However, this is also a great opportunity. A gleam of light flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes, and he didn't get out of his body even after breaking the water. He directly lifted it up and blocked it in front of him. At the same time, Shaki's body was completely covered by his perception and unreservedness of Reiatsu. Next moment. Bang! The wall of the bar slammed open, the smoke filled with dust and the gravel splashed, and the figure of Zhang Yang flew out, but then the sole of the foot stepped in the air, rubbing back in the air for a certain distance as if stepping on the ground, and then stopped. Devil Fruit Ability. Hockey exuding sternness all over his body, Shaki, who came out of the hole in the wall smashed by Zhang Yang, looked at Zhang Yang standing out of thin air, and couldn't help muttering with a serious face. Devil Fruit Ability, especially the Devil Fruit with good strength, is often the most difficult to deal with. Almost. Zhang Yang was too lazy to explain, and even he was thinking about what kind of Devil Fruit would he use to explain if Liurin Ruahuo appeared in the public eye in the future. Whether you are a Devil Fruit person or not, don't even think about leaving here today. Shaki let out a low voice, his feet slammed hard, and when the ground cracked, the whole person jumped straight into the air, shot towards Zhang Yang, and punched Zhang Yang with a punch. Seeing this, Zhang Yang shook his head helplessly. "Actually, I didn't plan to leave now." While muttering softly in his mouth, Zhang Yang's response in his hand was not slow. The water was pulled out directly, and he waved directly at the lacing Shaki, and a sword pressure shot out directly. Sword chi. Shaki Vivi was startled, but it was too late to dodge, so he could only strengthen hockey and punch the sword. Snapped. Like a punctured bubble, the sword pressure was instantly shattered, but at the same time, Shaki discovered that Zhang Yang had appeared above him at some point, and he lifted his foot high, ruthlessly from top to bottom. Kick down. Boom. Shaki fell from the sky at a high speed in an instant, smashing to the ground with a loud noise, and the smoke filled the air. Drink. Suddenly, Shaki's loud shout spread in the smoke, and then, a powerful air wave instantly blew the smoke away. Shaki exuded haki, who was many times stronger than before, raised his head and stared at Zhang Yang sharply. Little brat, don't think that you can fly without worry. Shaki stared at Zhang Yang and said. I didn't think so. Zhang Yang shook his head and chuckled, then his body sank, and he also fell to the ground. Looking at Shaki exuding powerful haki all over his body, the spiritual pressure in his body also spewed out. Boom. A powerful air wave spread violently with Zhang Yang as the center. Zhang Yang slammed the water in his hand and pointed at Shaki. It seems that it doesn't make sense. If that's the case, let's talk with strength. Don't be too arrogant, kid. Seeing that Zhang Yang didn't even need to fly, Shaki thought that Zhang Yang would underestimate her again, but his face couldn't help but look a little bad. He blasted towards Zhang Yang mercilessly. Before the fist arrived, a strong fist wind blew Zhang Yang's hair and swayed violently. So fast. What a strong haki. Zhang Yang's face suddenly became serious, and now Shaki's strength may have reached the level of Vice Admiral. This kind of strength is very difficult for Zhang Yang to deal with if he doesn't use Lu Ren Ruahuo. Without any hesitation, the instant opens again. Boom. The white lightning exploded from Zhang Yang's back in an instant. The white short sleeves turned into pieces. Zhang Yang's feet also slowly lifted off the ground, and the ground under his feet continued to crack and disintegrate under the powerful lightning. What devil fruit did this kid eat? Seeing this scene, Shaki's eyes suddenly flashed a dignified, first flight, and now thunder and lightning. She had no idea what kind of devil fruit it was. If it was Guro Guro no Mi rumble fruit, she just said Zhang Yang's first one-shot Zhang Yang can be completely elementalized. However, doubts turned into doubts. Shaki still didn't stop at all, and threw it towards Zhang Yang's fist without hesitation. Seeing, it is time to hit Zhang Yang. Whoosh. A white electric light flashed in front of Shaki, and Zhang Yang disappeared in front of Shaki. However, Shaki's expression remained unchanged, his fists hadn't retracted, and he suddenly squatted down. Swish. Ling Lai's gust of wind whizzed past, and a kick wrapped in thunder and lightning swept past her head at high speed, and the owner of the kick was Zhang Yang, who appeared behind Shaki at some point. Observation haki. Zhang Yang's eyes narrowed slightly, his legs hadn't retracted, he was just about to make a move, but Shaki, who was squatting in front of him, suddenly disappeared, leaving only a faint smoke whirling in place. Shaki appeared on Zhang Yang's side in an instant, with a powerful haki in both hands, hitting Zhang Yang's waist in a special posture. Empty stream. Shaki's lips slightly opened, and the next moment, a terrifying force spewed out from Zhang Yang's waist. Zhang Yang's face changed, and the whole person shot out suddenly, hitting a dilapidated and broken wall a few hundred meters away, slammed into it hard. Boom. There was a loud noise, a lot of smoke and dust filled the air, and Zhang Yang's figure was completely covered in it. Woo. Seeing this scene, Shaki breathed a sigh of relief, but his eyes were still fixed on the smoke. The woman's intuition told him that Zhang Yang could not be defeated so easily by her. Chapter 42. Rayleigh, Hades. I recommend another book of mine, The Endless Plunder of Martial Arts. The first world is the movie version of The Deer and Ding Ding Ji. Everything you want. Readers can try to read it. Dividing line. In fact, it is indeed impossible for Zhang Yang to be defeated so easily. Zhang Yang's current strength is actually not very clear to him. Although he only has the spiritual power of an ordinary vice captain, he has the combat experience and moves of the chief captain for thousands of years. Zhang Yang's strength is definitely not something that an ordinary vice captain can compete with. In addition, Shikai's flow is like fire. If they really fight, even if they can't beat the captain level, they won't lose in a short time. You must know that Rairan Ruahuo is the strongest and oldest Zanpakuto of the flame type, and the 6,000-degree flame of Shikai alone cannot be tolerated by ordinary people. Shaki's strength is strong, but at most Vice Admiral's strength, even if you don't use Shikai, Jongyang may not be able to defeat her, but it is impossible to lose so easily. Of course, if the time is too long, it is not necessarily. After all, the high combat power of Jongyang is completely based on the consumption of a lot of spiritual power. Talk too far. Just as Shaki was staring at the smoke a few hundred meters away, ready to prepare for Jongyang's sudden attack, Jongyang's voice suddenly came out from the smoke. The thunderous carriage, the gaps in the spinning wheel, this thing has light, it is divided into 6 parts, the 61 6-pillar light prison of the binding road. Swish. As the loud voice in the smoke fell, 6 golden energy light sheets suddenly formed around Shaki like petals, and then shrank violently, trapping Shaki tightly in place. The sudden attack suddenly changed Shaki's face, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Just now, she used observation haki to listen to Jongyang's movements all the time, and she didn't see Jongyang attack at all. How could she be attacked suddenly? What the hell is this? Shaki tried to break free, but found that the seemingly thin 6-path energy sheet didn't move at all, and there was even a strange force that made it difficult for her to even move her body. Without any hesitation, all of Shaki's haki poured out of the body without reservation. Suddenly, the 6 energy tablets began to shake violently, as if they would shatter at any time. However, just when she was about to shatter the 6 energy tablets with all her might, a blade stretched out from the side and gently pressed against her neck. I won, don't move, or you will die. I don't know when it appeared on Shaki, and a hand put the broken water on Shaki's neck and laughed loudly. Shaki moved for a while, then the haki all over his body slowly dissipated, glanced at Jongyang on the side, his face suddenly calmed down, and said lightly, you won. I don't think so. Boom. As soon as Shaki finished speaking, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly descended from the sky. This breath is full of domineering and heavy, very similar to spiritual pressure, but it is not as oppressive as spiritual pressure. The whole world seems to be in this breath. Shivering down. Conqueror haki. Jongyang's face changed suddenly. Under this breath, even he couldn't help feeling dazed for a while. Without any hesitation, the spiritual pressure in the body spurted out without reservation, and Jongyang returned to normal, but the feeling of domineering and heaviness did not decrease, but became stronger. Not only that. Swish. A sturdy figure followed Conqueror haki in front of Jongyang. Jongyang only had time to quickly block broken water in front of him, and a big sword fell from the sky, slashing on broken water with a strong whistling sound. Files. Sparks splashed everywhere. Jongyang only felt an irresistible force attacking, and the arm holding Xuanshui was aching for a while, and Xuanshu almost came out of his hand, but even so, Jongyang's body was going to be fired like a cannonball. Fly out. Boom boom boom. A series of collisions sounded. Jongyang's body flew directly for a few hundred meters, hit the ground, bounced, then hit the ground again, rolled and stopped, leaving countless cracks along the way. Cough cough. Jongyang coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood, stood up with the support of the broken water, raised his head to look at the strong figure in the distance, felt the pain from his body, but showed a smile. It was an uncle who looked about 40 or 50 years old, with half-white shoulder-length curly hair, a pair of floral trousers and a white shirt, and a pair of round eyes. He looked like a decadent uncle. Of course, if you ignore him at this moment, the horror of Conqueror haki exuded from his body and the words of the great sword in his hand that would blow Jongyang's sword into the air. The first moment he saw the other party, the first moment he felt the terrifying Conqueror haki, Jongyang knew the identity of the other party. The target he was looking for this time was the deputy captain of the One Piece King of Pirates, Pluto. Rayleigh. Rayleigh glanced at Jongyang, who stood up a few hundred meters away, then looked at the 6-pillar light prison on Shaki's waist, stretched out his left hand and squeezed it, and the 6-pillar light prison suddenly turned into a little starlight and dissipated in the air. You're back. Shaki suddenly Rayleigh Vivi Isho. How could I not know that you were making such a big noise here? Rayleigh smiled, then looked at Zhang Yang, and said with a slightly strange look, who is that kid? He actually has Conqueror Haki. Conqueror Haki, Shaki exclaimed suddenly. Well, although it's a little different, it should be Conqueror Haki, otherwise he can't resist my attack under my Conqueror. This kid turns out to be the owner of Conqueror Haki. Shaki looked at Zhang Yang in shock, and then said seriously, Rayleigh, this kid is here to find you. He is very strong and has many strange abilities, so be careful. No matter how strong you are nothing but a brat. Rayleigh gently Isho, then walked towards Zhang Yang, and as he walked in, Conqueror Haki suddenly rushed towards Zhang Yang again. Feeling the increasing pressure brought by Conqueror Haki, Zhang Yang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then took a deep breath, stood up straight, and the spiritual pressure in his body spewed out again. Boom! The invisible Reiatsu and Haki collided, and a powerful hurricane suddenly formed between the two of them, and there were slits on the ground, spreading in all directions. However, although Zhang Yang's fighting power was good, the Reiatsu was only at the level of a vice captain. How could he resist Rayleigh's overwhelming Reiatsu? Soon, Zhang Yang's Reiatsu was defeated and completely defeated by Conqueror Haki. After defeating Zhang Yang's Reiatsu, Rayleigh did not continue to release Conqueror Haki, and the surging hurricane in the field suddenly stopped. Sweat appeared on Vivi's face on Zhang Yang's face, looking at Rayleigh who stopped releasing Conqueror Haki slowly walking towards him. A trace of undisguised admiration appeared on the corner of his mouth, and said softly, It's really amazing, as expected of the One Piece King of Pirates. Right and left hand, Rayleigh, Hades. Little devil, I heard that you were looking for me. Rayleigh gently Isho, not caring that Zhang Yang said his name. That's right, Zhang Yang nodded. Can you tell me, what is your business with me? Rayleigh continued. Of course, but before that. Zhang Yang nodded, paused, raised his head to look at Rayleigh, and suddenly retracted the broken water in his hand into the scabbard and inserted it on the ground next to him, looking at Rayleigh with warlike eyes and said, I want to learn about One Piece. What kind of power do the people on the King of Pirates have? Quote. Chapter 43 Full Strength. Shikai. Oh. Looking at Zhang Yang with a face full of fighting intent, Rayleigh was stunned for a moment, then looked at Zhang Yang with undisguised admiration in his eyes. He was knocked back with a knife just now, and the Conqueror's competition also lost to him, but even so, Zhang Yang still wanted to challenge him. No matter who Zhang Yang was, this kind of person deserves Rayleigh to give him what a strong man deserves: respect. Kid, tell me your name. Rayleigh said seriously. Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang said with the same serious expression. Good. Rayleigh haha Isho said. Although I don't know who you are, but your courage is admirable, come on. Let me see your strength and try to beat me. That's what I mean. Zhang Yang nodded. Shaki, hold the bottle for me. Looking at Zhang Yang without the slightest fear, Rayleigh threw the wine bottle from his waist to Shaki and said loudly. Shaki, that is. Shaki caught the bottle, glanced at Rayleigh helplessly, then glanced at Zhang Yang, shook his head, walked to the bar and looked at it from a distance. Because she knew that a fierce battle would follow. Let's get started. Rayleigh pointed at Zhang Yang with a chuckle, but seeing that Zhang Yang didn't mean to hold a sword, he could not help frowning, shaking his head and chuckling. It seems that I have been underestimated. Your swordsmanship should be quite good. Awesome, right? Why don't you use a sword? Don't tell me, you don't think you can use a sword against me at all. With that said, the Conqueror Haki on Rayleigh slowly poured out again, and a wave of air began to spread around Rayleigh. The oppressive breath brought by Conqueror Haki, even Shaki at the bar could feel it. Rayleigh, are you going to use the real one? Shaki murmured somewhat surprised, looking at Rayleigh and Zhang Yang in the distance. On the other side, feeling the majestic Rayleigh, Zhang Yang shook his head as usual, glanced at the broken water beside him on the ground, and stretched out his hand while walking towards Rayleigh. Swish! In Rayleigh, surprised eyes, a long knife with a handle of Dongfa Shozi appeared in his hand. This sword is his last and strongest trump card, the strongest and oldest Zanpakudo of the flame element, and the blade is like fire. Slowly bringing Lu Ren Ruahuo to his waist, Zhang Yang held the handle of the knife with his right hand, and his body was low, looking at the surprised Rayleigh and said solemnly, "I don't need that knife, not because I look down on you, but because I am now this knife in my hand. Can unleash my full strength." Boom. As he spoke, the spiritual pressure in Zhang Yang's body spurted out, and a wave of air not inferior to Rayleigh spread, and countless sand and stones were rolled and blown away. At the same time, Ruohuo, the flowing blade around Zhang Yang's waist, was also pulled out, and he slashed straight at Rayleigh. The first stroke. Swish. A huge sword pressure shot directly towards Rayleigh with Zhang Yang's loud shout, and the speed was so fast that it came to Rayleigh in just an instant. What a strong sword energy. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed in envy, and he didn't dodge, or it was too late to dodge. Armament Hockey instantly covered the great sword in his hand, and slashed directly at the huge sword in front of him. Boom. The sword press collided with the big sword, and a huge shock wave spread immediately. The ground under Rayleigh's feet collapsed and sunk, and a large pit with a diameter of nearly 10 meters appeared. The sword press Vivi paused for a moment, and then pushed directly. Rayleigh kept retreating rapidly, leaving 2 deep ravines under his feet along the way. Rayleigh was knocked back. Seeing this scene, Shaki couldn't help being a little shocked, but then he came back to his senses and stared at the retreating Rayleigh. No, Rayleigh probably didn't use all his strength. As Shaki was talking, Rayleigh, who was retreating rapidly, exerted force on his feet, and his feet sank deeply into the ground. The speed of his backwards suddenly slowed down, and at the same time, the great sword that was pressed against by the sword in his hand also exerted force. Boom. The ground with a radius of more than 10 meters collapsed violently, and a powerful shock wave spread again. The huge sword shook violently, and then it was directly chopped into 2 pieces and flew over from both sides of Rayleigh. Boom. There were 2 loud noises, the sword pressed behind Rayleigh and there was a huge explosion, and the violent wind blew from behind Rayleigh, causing his hair and clothes to sway violently, but he himself did not move at all. Seeing this scene, Zhang Yang was not surprised at all. The white lightning on his back exploded, and the instant opening was turned on again. The ground under his feet was directly broken and decomposed by the violent lightning. At the same time, his other hand also held the flowing blade. Hilt. Two-handed kendo, the captain's strongest kendo. What is this? Devil fruit power. Seeing the violent white lightning burst out from Zhang Yang's body, Rayleigh was also stunned for a moment, and like Shaki regarded it as the power of the devil fruit. But then he didn't care, but laughed happily. Interesting. It's really funny. You are the funniest kid I've ever seen over the years, Zhang Yang, come on. I won't be merciful just because you're a kid. Rayleigh laughed loudly, and a more powerful hockey spewed out of him, with a boom sound. With Rayleigh as the center, the ground cracked, and violent air waves spread. Me too, I won't be merciful just because you are an old man. Infected by Rayleigh, Zhang Yang laughed as well, and the thunder and lightning around his body became more violent, and the remaining pieces of clothes on his upper body were directly blown away, and his upper body was directly exposed to the air, revealing his strong body. Next moment. Bang, bang. The ground under the 2 of them flipped over. Zhang Yang and Rayleigh rushed towards each other at the same time. The flowing blade Ruohuo and Rayleigh's great sword collided like a meteorite. Boom. A loud noise spread throughout the entire 13GR. Pirates, human traffickers, and some wicked people in the industry raised their heads and looked in the direction of Zhang Yang. After being stunned for a while, Chi rushed there. In this illegal zone, the loud explosions often mean battle, and if there is battle, it means interest, and if there is interest, it will attract them to go. As for danger, in the face of interests, they have long been put aside. A large amount of smoke and dust obscured the sight, countless gravel fell from the sky, and the strong wind spread in all directions. In front of the bar, the strong wind blew Shaggy's hair and clothes. Seeing that the nearly 1 kilometer in front of him was completely covered by smoke and dust, Shaggy's eyes were full of shock. The development of things completely exceeded his expectations. Who is Rayleigh? Rayleigh is the deputy captain of the One Piece King of Pirates ship, the right hand of the One Piece King of Pirates Gul D. Roger, an existence that even Marine Admiral dares not easily deal with. It is this kind of person, and now one seems to have 10. How could a 4 or 5-year-old boy fight with him to such an extent? How is this possible? Whoosh! Shaggy was in shock. Zhang Yang, who was surrounded by lightning, suddenly flew upside down from the smoke and dust. He was in the air, coughing out a mouthful of blood. He stepped on the air, rubbing back as if standing on the ground. When his body stopped, he waved it again while holding the flowing blade in both hands. Files. Rayleigh's figure appeared out of thin air in front of Zhang Yang. The long sword in his hand collided with the flowing blade, and the strong shock wave spread violently in the air, causing Shaggy, who was watching below, to hold his hand in front of him. Watching the two, the human battle is full of shock. Cough cough. Being hit again, Zhang Yang couldn't help coughing up another mouthful of blood, and then he endured the pain, and suddenly released his right hand holding the handle of the knife, and swung it fiercely at Rayleigh. One bone. Bang. A white wave of air spread between Zhang Yang's fist and Rayleigh's. Rayleigh's expression changed, only to feel a strong force attacking, and the whole person shot out to the ground. Boom. Rayleigh smashed to the ground with a loud noise, and even the ground trembled in Vivi. A huge hole appeared on the ground, and the smoke was directly swept away by a powerful shock wave. Ha, ha. A punch knocked Rayleigh into the air, and the fierce battle made Zhang Yang gasp for breath. Looking at Rayleigh, who was lying in the hole below, the thunder and lightning wrapped around Zhang Yang's body slowly dissipated. Rayleigh. Watching Zhang Yang punch Rayleigh in the air with his own eyes, Shaggy was stunned for a moment, and then nervously shouted to Rayleigh in the far hole. "Don't worry, Shaggy, I'm fine." Rayleigh's voice came from the pit, and he climbed up from the ground as if he was not injured at all, patted the dust on his body. Rayleigh smiled at Shaggy, then looked at Zhang Yang, and said with a light smile, "Do you want to continue? You should be almost at your limit, right? But to have such strength at this age, I have to say, Zhang Yang, you are really amazing." Rayleigh said with sincere admiration, but Zhang Yang smiled helplessly. Rayleigh, the king of Pluto, is worthy of being Rayleigh, the king of Pluto. Didn't get serious with him. It's time for you to show off. Muttered as if he was talking to himself, Zhang Yang took a deep breath, and then held Lu Ren Ruohuo in front of him. What else does this kid do? This scene suddenly made Rayleigh and Shaggy raise their heads strangely to look at Zhang Yang standing out of thin air. But soon, Rayleigh and Shaggy became shocked, because they found that Zhang Yang's momentum and conqueror hockey were rapidly increasing. At the same time, Zhang Yang's somewhat solemn and distant voice also entered their ears from the sky. There are all kinds of things, all turn to ashes, and the blades are like fire. Boom. The terrifying high-temperature flames spewed out in an instant. Chapter 44: The Sky-High Fire Curtain. Hans is a well-known human trafficker in 16GR. Today was supposed to be a happy day for him, but now he is not happy at all, because his client, the Little Pirates, has breached the contract. The goods were handed over to him, and he even asked him to give him money for free. With Hans's fiery temper, how could he possibly endure such a thing? Therefore, although he did obediently give the money to the Little Pirates at that time, but later, Hans found someone to find out the whereabouts of the Little Pirates, and then found a large group of colleagues to try to save face. So, at 13GR, Hans blocked the path of the Little Pirates with a large group of people. Hey, Captain Oriton, Vice Captain Dick, didn't expect it to be me. Hans walked out of the crowd with a proud face, looking at the small pirates surrounded by his own people and others. It's you. Seeing Hans, everyone in the Little Pirates suddenly changed their expressions, not even Olton and Dicky. They knew that they had kicked the iron plate this time. What do you want? Oriton looked at Hans Dao vigilantly, and at the same time secretly resented Zhang Yang. If it weren't for Zhang Yang, they would not have lost that stunning beauty, and they would not have thought of the consequences of black eating black. How's it going? Hey. Isho, who had no good intentions in Hans, sneered, you asked me what I wanted to do. You broke the rules of our business, and you asked what we should do. We'll return the money to you, and this matter is over in the end. How about we make friends? If you have anything in the future, our little pirates will do our best to help you. Dicky stepped forward. Bah! Hans spat fiercely, and said viciously, I still make friends. I will naturally get the money back, but after killing you, brothers. Kill these bastards. Oh! Hearing Hans's words, the others immediately shouted in unison, and then one by one took up weapons and approached the little pirate group with bad intentions. Seeing this scene, Olden's face suddenly became extremely ugly, and he pulled out the big axe behind his face and shouted, brothers. Since these bastards won't let us live, then we will fight with them. Oh, I fought with them. Affected by Oriton, the members of the little pirates also went crazy one by one, and they were desperate to raise their weapons. It seems that when the two sides are about to fight. Boom! A loud noise suddenly came from a distance, and with the loud noise, Vivi even trembled on the ground. What's the matter? Whether it was Hans and the others or the little pirates, everyone was startled by the sudden sound, but then Hans reacted instantly. Brothers, there are good goods, don't pay attention to them, hurry up and take a look. Hans said with a happy face, and then without waiting for other people to react, he hurried to the direction where the sound came from. After the others were stunned for a moment, they also reacted abruptly, and hurriedly chased after them. Only a group of small pirates were left here, not understanding what happened. Captain Oriton, what shall we do? After being stunned for a while, including Dicky, a group of people looked at Oriton in unison. Oriton looked at the backs of Hans and others, recalling the good stuff that Hans said just now, gritted his teeth, and waved, let's go over and take a look. Then he took the lead in chasing up, and the others quickly followed. The two groups of people ran one after the other in the direction of the loud noise, but before they could reach their destination, they found that the air seemed to become sultry, and then, behind the distant hillside, a huge fire curtain soaring into the sky, there was an incomparably hot breath in the air. And getting closer and closer, sweat beads even began to appear on their bodies. Upon discovering this, whether it was the little pirates or Hans and the others, they hurriedly stopped, looked up at the sky-high fire curtain with a horrified expression, and did not dare to take a step forward. In fact, not only them, but the entire Sabayati archipelago looked up at the huge fire curtain that shot straight into the sky, feeling the hot air, completely ignorant of what happened. But after being immersed for a moment, all the newspaper reporters rushed to the scene of the incident, but it was hard to say whether they dared to hurry too much. It was impossible for Marine to not know about such a big thing. The moment he saw the sky-high fire curtain, especially when he could feel the heat in the air from such a distance, Voss and Rear Admiral jumped in his heart. He didn't dare to hesitate, and personally led a large number of troops in the direction of 13GR. Rush away. For a while, the entire Sabayati archipelago became lively due to the sudden appearance of the sky-high fire curtain. Countless pirates, reporters, marines and even civilians gathered at 13GR. And just when people were rushing to the fire curtain, guessing what happened to 13GR, 13GR, Shaki's ripping off bar. Wow wow wow. The terrifying high-temperature flames were churning and surging like ocean waves, and the location within a radius of 1 kilometer was completely surrounded by the flames. Under the high temperature, the lawn on the ground quickly turned yellow, and even the leaves of the mangrove trees not far from the 13GR body were yellowing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the moisture in the atmosphere became more and more scarce, and the range has also grown larger over time. After a while, it spread to the entire 13GR. This piece of heaven and earth seems to have completely become a scorching hell because of this sea of fire. In the sea of fire, Rayleigh's face was very rarely full of shock. Armament Hockey didn't dare to have any reservations and covered it all over his body, so he didn't have the feeling of being melted, but even so, his gray hair Vivi's hair also began to twist, her lips became dry, and her body's moisture was rapidly disappearing. This kid, what devil fruit did he eat? Rayleigh watched in shock at the ente-like Zhongyang shrouded in flames in the air, and directly defined Zhongyang as a devil fruit-capable person. After all, what is this sea of fire if it is not the power of a devil fruit? What makes Rayleigh puzzled is just what kind of devil fruit is this, to have such terrifying power. Burn the fruit. This is impossible. Rayleigh has seen this kind of fruit in the devil fruit illustration. It is absolutely impossible to have this kind of power. Rayleigh. A somewhat panicked female voice came into Rayleigh's ears, and Rayleigh suddenly came back to his senses and turned his head to look. On the hills in the distance, Shacky's bar had turned into a sea of fire, and Shacky himself was in the sea of fire. Persevered with Armament Hockey. But even so, the clothes on Shacky began to heat up under the high temperature, and she was dripping with sweat. If she continued, with Shacky's strength, not to mention her clothes, I'm afraid her whole body would suffer serious burns. Shacky. Seeing this scene, Rayleigh was shocked, and the long sword in his hand swung fiercely with a powerful hockey. Boom. A huge sword chi shot out, instantly cutting a channel in the sea of fire, leaving a bottomless huge ditch on the ground. It's just that Rayleigh was just about to rush over, but the sea of fire seemed to be stimulated, and the sword energy was swallowed up by the tumbling. The passage was covered by flames again, and even other flames were swallowed up by Rayleigh. Drink. Rayleigh shouted loudly. Conqueror Hockey and Armament Hockey burst out with all their strength. The terrifying hockey instantly repelled all the surrounding flames, and within 100 meters, the ground collapsed and cracked, and no flames approached. After doing this, Rayleigh did not continue to save Shacky, but turned his head to look at Zhongyang in the sky, stepped on the ground, and the whole person carried a terrifying momentum like a wild beast. And go. Hurry up and stop. Chapter 45 Chart 13 GR. Is this the power of Shikai? How strong? In the mid-air, dozens of meters high, Zhongyang stood in the flames out of thin air. The flowing blade in his hand was burning like fire, and the whole body was filled with terrifying high-temperature flames, but it did not affect him in any way. Looking at the sea of fire in front of him, feeling the terrifying temperature contained in it and the solid captain-level spiritual power in his body, the corners of Zhongyang's mouth couldn't help but raise an arc of excitement. It's just that Shikai is so strong. What if it's Bankai? Wouldn't it be invincible? However, spiritual power seems to be rapidly depleting. After rejoicing, Zhongyang frowned again. Although Shikai's post-spiritual pressure jumped to captain level, the spiritual power needed to maintain Shikai is also huge. 1 or 2 more times, his spiritual power will be exhausted. But even so, there is no denying the power of Shikai. The strongest and oldest Zanpakuto of the flame element, it is indeed extremely powerful. Hurry up and stop. Zhongyang was feeling the powerful power brought by Shikai, and Rayleigh's loud shout suddenly came over. Zhongyang came back to his senses and looked down. When he saw Rayleigh rushing towards him and persisting in the sea of fire, Shacky, who was suddenly startled, hurriedly controlled the flames beside Shacky to retreat, and at the same time, the flowing blade Ruahuo in his hand also met Rayleigh's long sword with flaming flames. Boom! A bang sounded in the air, and the terrifying energy exploded instantly. The surrounding flames were blown away frantically and retreated, and Zhongyang himself shot out like a cannonball, flying directly out of the distance of thousands of meters. He slammed into the trunk of the mangrove tree with 13 GR written on it. With a boom, a big hole was directly smashed into the trunk by Zhongyang, and the whole mangrove tree shook violently. Sure enough, his body was stuck in the trunk of the mangrove tree, and he looked at Rayleigh's falling figure from a distance, and a trace of blood was slowly left on the corner of his mouth. Even though his strength has increased after Shikai, he is still not Rayleigh's opponent when he is full of strength. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Jong Young moved his body, which was extremely sore, and flames erupted from the fire again, surrounding Jong Young in the middle, stepping on it, turning into a ball of fire and lashing towards Rayleigh. On the other side, Rayleigh, who knocked Jong Young into the air, also fell to the ground. It's just that his body was not so well at this time. The right side of his hair was directly burned off, the shirt on his body was also burned to tatters, and the right hand holding the sword was covered with burn marks. What a domineering flame! Feeling the tingling pain in his arm, Rayleigh couldn't help muttering a little seriously. Jong Yang's own strength was not strong for him, but the flames made him helpless. Even with his hockey level, he can't completely defend against the temperature of these flames. It is hard to believe that if ordinary people encounter such flames, they will be directly burned to ashes. Of course, if he really wants to fight recklessly, even if he can win, I am afraid that he will not feel better. When did such a person appear in the sea? Turning his head to look at the still unextinguished flames around him, Rayleigh looked at Shaki, who was no longer in danger. He breathed a sigh of relief and murmured, "But fortunately, we can be sure that he is not an enemy for the time being." "Shaki, you get out of here first, there's such a big noise here, Marine will definitely come over soon." Rayleigh shouted to Shaki. "What about you?" Shaki asked worriedly, especially seeing the injury on Rayleigh's hand. She had never seen Rayleigh hurt in the past few years. "I'll come later, don't worry, I can feel that the kid named Jong Young has no ill intentions towards us." Rayleigh chuckled lightly. "Got it." Shaki hesitated for a while, then glanced at Jong Young flying over from a distance, nodded, and flew away. She also understood that what Rayleigh said was right. Jong Young should really have no ill will towards them, otherwise the flames around her would not have receded. Seeing Shaki leave, Rayleigh turned to look at the sky, where Jong Young, who was covered in flames, just happened to fly over. "Are you hurt?" Seeing the burns on Rayleigh's body, Jong Young was stunned for a moment. Although he was excited by the power of the flames, the reiatsu that radiated from his body was indeed a little quieter. Rayleigh is still one of Jong Yang's favorite characters. Apart from that reason, in today's fight, he just wanted to test his strength, but if he really hurt Rayleigh because of himself, Jong Young still doesn't think much about it. Rayleigh noticed that Jong Yang's conqueror haki had weakened, and immediately knew something. With a wave of the big sword in his hand, a powerful sword chi shot towards Jong Yang. Seeing this, the flowing blade in Jong Yang's hand was like a fire. Whoa! A large number of flames rushed towards the sword chi, and under the terrifying high temperature, the sword chi disappeared before reaching Jong Yang. "Are you sympathizing with this old man? Do your best. Let me see your true strength." Seeing that his sword chi was dissolved, Rayleigh didn't care, pointing the big sword in his hand at Jong Yang, and laughed. Hearing this, Jong Yang Vivi froze for a moment, then grinned Isho as well. "As I said, I won't be merciful just because you're an old man. Be careful, I'm not very good at controlling this trick." Jong Yang said in a high voice, then raised the flowing blade in his hand Ruo-Huo, and Rayleigh's face below suddenly became serious. Songming. Jong Yang held the flowing blade Ruo-Huo high, and with the slight movement of his lips, the flowing blade Ruo-Huo also slammed down, and the whole sea of fire also vibrated. Just puff. A soft sound rang out, the flowing blades were like flames on fire, and the surrounding fire suddenly disappeared like bubbles shattering, revealing the scorched ground and the flowers and trees that had turned to ashes. Slowly recovered and began to descend. Quiet. Incredibly quiet. Jong Yang was dumbfounded, and Rayleigh was dumbfounded, looking at the flames that suddenly disappeared. Neither of them understood what happened. Shikai lifted. Jong Yang looked at the flowing blade Ruo-Huo that released Shikai in his hand, muttered, and then only felt his body soften for a while and fell from the sky. Seeing this scene, Rayleigh was shocked and came back to his senses. He went forward to catch Jong Yang and put him on the ground. Excessive consumption. Rayleigh asked tentatively, with such a powerful force that broke out just now, if Jong Yang can really maintain it, then Rayleigh will really wonder if he is dreaming. Zhang Yang's face was pale, and he nodded weakly. Pretty much what Rayleigh said, but with some differences. The former owner of Ryer and Ruahuo was the commander-in-chief after all. Although Zhang Yang also knew his name, he could shikai, but after all, Zanpakuto has a sword spirit. Zhang Yang has never performed shikai before doing sword meditation, and it can be successfully poured out. It's already, thank goodness. Damn, I forgot about this. Feeling the incomparable body, Zhang Yang cursed in his heart. Looking at the pale face, Rayleigh shook his head helplessly and said, young people are easy to be impulsive and do things recklessly. The stronger the power, the greater the danger. This is the consequence of nonsense. Zhang Yang smiled helplessly, he was really stupid. Just as he was about to say something, Zhang Yang suddenly felt some Reiatsu approaching here, so he said in a weak voice, someone is here. I'll take you away. Rayleigh raised his head and glanced into the distance. In observation hockey, he felt that countless people were approaching here. 10 minutes later, 2 groups of people came here carefully. Under the sun, their identities are clearly visible, they are Hans and his party and the little pirates. What the hell happened here? Why is it like being burned by fire everywhere? There is still a burning feeling in the air. Looking at the charred ground around them, Hans and his party and the little pirates who had come together unknowingly were all horrified. They can't imagine what happened here to turn into this fire-like scene. You know, since they stepped into 13GR, what they saw was a piece of scorched black. The green grass was scorched, the trees and stones were scorched, and even the 13GR main mangrove, the top of the tree turned yellow. This is simply, the whole 13GR is scorched. Chapter 46 Zhang Yang disappeared. Hey, have you heard? It seems that the 13GR side has been scorched by the fire just now. It's a terrible one. It's pitch black everywhere. It seems that even the mangroves are almost scorched. You said that. I also saw it in the newspaper. The newspaper said that it was not an ordinary flame, but that it was caused by a battle between pirates. Pirates. Pirates are so powerful, aren't they? It's scary. What about Marine? Marine shouldn't be motionless, right? Of course. In the afternoon, I saw a lot of Marines going to 13GR. They should be investigating. Oh, that's good, that's good. First really hope Marine can catch those terrifying pirates sooner, otherwise I won't be able to sleep at night. Conversations like this can be heard everywhere in the Sabayati archipelago in the evening. Although it has only been 6 or 7 hours since the fire curtain incident, in the afternoon, thanks to the reporter's blessing, the entire Sabayati archipelago knows the details of 13GR, not only the Sabayati archipelago, but the Sabayati archipelago as the starting point. It is spreading to islands and countries in all directions. After all, the location of Sabayati archipelago is more sensitive, and this kind of thing happens suddenly, although it will not cause a sensation in the world, but the impact is not small. Especially for some people, this incident is even more of a headache. 13GR, under the night, what used to be very calm here is unusually noisy tonight. Searchlights with closed eyes are scattered all over the 13GR, and the entire 13GR is illuminated like daytime. The charred land, flowers and trees are undoubtedly revealed under the searchlights. Marines are patrolling around to see if there is any abnormality. Occasionally, a burst of sound when they exclaimed, the other Marines would quickly look over, and the atmosphere was very tense. After all, after checking here in the afternoon, it is very likely that those with powerful devil fruit abilities have fought here, and they may not have left, so they can't help but be nervous. However, there are others who are more nervous than them. Standing under the huge mangrove tree, looking at the hole on the trunk of the mangrove tree that was obviously knocked out and had burn marks, Vasek Rear Admiral held a delicate long knife in his hand and glanced at it from time to time. His brows furrowed tightly, and his heart was full of anxiety and unease. This kind of thing happened under his jurisdiction, especially since the reason and the culprit have not yet been found. He must be responsible for this matter, but compared to this matter, he cares about another matter more. Zhang Yang is gone. Yes, Zhang Yang is gone. Since seeing Zhang Yang once in the office in the morning, he has never seen Zhang Yang again. 13GR was burned like this, although he needs to be responsible, but because 13GR is an illegal zone, at most he will be punished slightly for not finding the culprit. But who is Zhang Yang? That SA monster-level genius that Marshal Kong is very concerned about. If you lose it in your hands, you can't pass the test with casual punishment. It's a trivial matter to go to a military court, but if the marshal gets angry, it's really over. If Zhang Yang suddenly disappeared for a day or two, he wouldn't care. The key is that there was a fire curtain incident today, and he also found Zhang Yang's tactical sword here, so he couldn't help but let him don't be nervous. This is the feeling of the accident scene. Zhang Yang, you must not have an accident. Watching the large knife in his hand break the water, Vosk sighed. Vosk Graham Rear Admiral. At this time, a sailor ran over panting. Seeing this sailor, Vosker's eyes suddenly lit up, and he quickly stepped forward and asked, "How is it? Is there any news about Major Zhang Yang?" Report Rear Admiral. We have searched the entire Sabayati archipelago, and no news of Rear Admiral has been publicized. The Marine reported, saluting. Hearing this, Vosk couldn't help but his face stiffened, panic flashed in his eyes, and he shouted in a gaffe, "Look for it. Go find it for me again. If you can't find it, don't come back to me." Yes. The sea soldier was taken aback by Vosk's sudden outburst. He nodded quickly, and hurriedly went to find Zhang Yang again. Blue blue blue. The voice of the phone bug rang suddenly. Vosk took out the phone bug in a distraught, and said impatiently, "Hello. Who is it?" The voice on the other side of the phone paused obviously, and after a while, Kong's voice came from the phone bug. "Vosk Rear Admiral, you seem to be troubled by something," Kong said lightly. "Yuan, Marshal." Vosk's eyes widened immediately, then his hands trembled, and he quickly clenched the phone and said in a panic, "I'm sorry Marshal, I didn't know it was you, Calm down Vosk Graham Rear Admiral." Kong gave a light drink, and then said with some doubts, "Is it because of the 13GR incident? Why do you feel so restless today?" Hearing this, Vosk almost burst into tears. "Calm down, how should I calm down? Major Zhang Yang, your most important genius is missing." Taking a few deep breaths, Vosk forced himself to calm down. Sooner or later, the Marshal would know about this matter. In that case, it's better to admit the mistake as soon as possible. Gritting his teeth, Vosk said solemnly, "I am sorry Marshal, Major Zhang Yang is missing." "What?" Kong on the phone worm's face suddenly changed, then he clenched the microphone and said solemnly, "Vosk beat Rear Admiral, what the hell is going on?" "It's such a Marshal." Vosk quickly told Kong all the details of the 13GR incident, from the appearance of the fire curtain and the mutation of the air to the 13GR turning into a coke land, from the discovery of Zhang Yang's saber to now. There is still no public news, nothing left. All told Kong. Kong on the phone bug's side fell silent after finishing Vosk's words. Judging from Vosk's description, Zhang Yang is sure to die, but he also knows a little about Zhang Yang's strength. A character who can make Zhang Yang unable to escape is absolutely impossible to appear in Sabayati archipelago. If there is, then there is only one person, Hades Rayleigh. Could it be him? Kong murmured, then shook his head, and said to Vosk seriously, "Vosk is against Rear Admiral, you don't have to blame yourself. It's still undecided whether there is anything wrong with Major Zhang Yang. You have people continue to search the island, I will do it as soon as possible." "Someone came over to assist you in your investigation?" "Yes." Vosk Rear Admiral answered seriously, and at the same time he was relieved. It seemed that the Marshal did not blame him. Hanging up the phone, Vosk glanced at the broken water in his hand, regained his composure, and said to the sailors passing by, "Evacuate 2/3 of the personnel and let them find Major Zhang Yang together." At the same time as Vosk gave the order, Kong in the Marine headquarters, the Marshal's office hesitated for a while, then suddenly stood up and walked out, preparing to hold a meeting. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night. Early the next morning, with the sound of a machine, a warship with its power system turned on docked at Sabayati Archipelago at a very fast speed. Chapter 47. It's time to play big. Marine's logo stands on the wrench for the seagull has a special meaning. The seagull represents that marine is everywhere in this sea, and no evil can escape the eyes of justice, and the wrench represents that marine not only overwhelmingly superior in force, as well as in technology. For example, the warship that came to the Sabayati Archipelago at a very fast speed, turned on the power system, and the oars on both sides of the ship turned rapidly, which could give the warship an extraordinary sailing speed. At this time, it was the early morning, and there was already a white belly in the distant horizon. The orange-yellow sun was slowly rising, and the warships slowly docked were shining with a strange metallic luster in the morning light. The warship docked, and two figures, one strong and one thin, walked down with a group of Marines. On the shore, Vasek Rear Admiral, who had already led people to wait here, saw the two familiar figures, and his expression changed suddenly, and he quickly greeted. Garp Vice Admiral, Borsellino Vice Admiral. Vask hurriedly saluted. Although there was no special expression on the surface, the shock in his heart couldn't be further added. He didn't expect the Marine headquarters to care so much about Zhang Yang's affairs. These two people are the Marine headquarters' top status and strength. It's really shocking that the two of them appear at the same time. That's right, these two are exactly Garp and the future Admiral Kazaru. As to how the two of them could be here at the same time, simply because of last night's meeting. Last night, Marshal Kong suddenly called an emergency meeting, and the first sentence he said shocked everyone. Zhang Yang is missing, and it is very likely to encounter an accident. When he heard the news, Garp, who had the hottest temper, was furious and almost rushed to Sabayati Archipelago that night, but fortunately, Sengoku stopped him in time and calmed him down a little. After that, after some discussions, it was finally decided that Garp and Borsellino would go together. That's what happened now. Let me ask you, is that bastard Zhang Yang really gone? Garp grabbed Vasek by the collar and stared at the bull's eyes. The fierce hockey all over his body instantly made Vasek cold sweat. Mama, Mr. Garp, don't get too excited, let's listen to Vas and Rear Admiral to talk about the details first. Borsellino put his hands in his pockets and said slowly. Humph. Hearing this, Garp snorted lightly, then let go of Vasek, then glared at Vasek and said, tell me what's going on quickly. Yes, Garp Vice Admiral, it's like this. Vasker dared to delay, he quickly told Garp about the 13GR incident yesterday afternoon, word for word, and then fought back. This is Major Zhang Yang's saber found at 13GR. Vasek handed it to Garp and said carefully. Garp took a look and immediately recognized that this was the broken water he gave to Zhang Yang. A trace of anger flashed in his eyes. With a bang, the ground under his feet was directly smashed. Unceasingly emanated from the body, and several sea soldiers who were too close rolled their eyes and fainted. Mr. Garp, don't worry too much. With the strength of Major Zhang Yang, it won't happen so easily. Borsellino said slowly. Garp didn't answer, but Hockey slowly retracted his body. Then I'll go to 13GR first, and I'll leave the rest to you, Mr. Garp. Borsellino said to Garp, and then without waiting for Garp to answer, since the whole person radiated a dazzling golden light, it turned into a light and disappeared suddenly. Keep this knife safe for me, and I'm going to look for it too. Garp threw the cut-off water into Vask's hands, and then without waiting for Vask's response, he walked directly into the distance, leaving only Vask and a group of seamen who were at a loss. At the same time, when the Marine headquarters started to act due to Zhang Yang's sudden disappearance, Zhang Yang, who was at the center of the incident, didn't know it at all, because at this time, he was busy restoring his spiritual power. This is an unknown basement in 42GR. It has a vast space and all kinds of furniture. Zhang Yang sat cross-legged on the bed. Lu Ren Ruahuo had been taken back from his mind. The spiritual power in his body was slowly recovering, and as the spiritual power recovered, the injuries on his body began to recover unknowingly. This battle with Rayleigh gave him a thorough understanding of his own strengths and shortcomings. Lu Ren Ruohuo is indeed powerful, so powerful that even if he is as strong as Rayleigh, he would not dare to face it, but in the same way, the spiritual power required to maintain Lu Ren Ruohuo is also very huge, not to mention, the current Zhang Yang has not been affected by Lu Ren Ruohuo. The official acknowledgement, not to mention super big moves such as the Scorching Hell, it is very good to be able to maintain Shikai for a period of time. After all, Shikai has not been passed through Daochen, and Zhang Yang can be said to be unprecedented. However, if you remove the flaming swords, Zhang Yang's strength is very limited, or the original words, the ordinary body is not as strong as the spiritual body, and the captain's proud of the white fight and kendo, he simply can't play it should be ability. But having said that, Zhang Yang is still young and has more time. To be able to reach this level at his age is definitely enough to be proud of. At least, that's what Shaki Rayleigh thought. Seeing Zhang Yang sitting cross-legged on the bed as if he was healing, Shaki and Rayleigh looked at each other, then shook their heads in unison. To be honest, after so many years on the sea, it was the first time that they had encountered a character like Zhang Yang that they could not see through. At such a young age, he possesses the strength to be looked up to by countless peers, and also possesses a devil fruit ability that they have never heard of. When they think of the terrifying flame, even they can't help but tremble. Without Haki, I am afraid that ordinary people will only be burned to ashes in that kind of flame, right? The strength is strong, and now even the way of healing is so strange, they are really curious about who Zhang Yang is. The two were watching Zhang Yang thinking about things, when suddenly, Rayleigh frowned and let out a light hum. What's wrong? Shaki looked over strangely. There are two troublesome people here. Rayleigh frowned. Is it Marine, S? Shaki frowned and said, and at the same time couldn't help turning her head to look at Zhang Yang. She remembered that Zhang Yang said he was Marine. Marine Hero Garp, Logia Glitter Fruit Power Borsellino. Rayleigh frowned. It's them. Shaki couldn't help being shocked for a moment. Marine Hero Garp, this is the legendary figure who has driven One Piece, King of Pirates, to death several times. Although the real facts have yet to be proved, he has at least the same level of Rayleigh. Strength is certain. And Borsellino, Logia's shining fruit ability, and the most popular figure in Marine, the same strength should not be underestimated. These two people appear here at the same time. Why is it abnormal? Could it be that Marine has decided to crusade Rayleigh? The old man and the wretched uncle are here. Just when the two were secretly guessing, Zhang Yang's voice suddenly came from the side. Shaki and Rayleigh looked, only to see that Zhang Yang had opened his eyes and was looking at them in surprise. Well, I landed not long ago. Rayleigh nodded solemnly. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then after thinking about it carefully, a cold sweat suddenly flowed down his forehead. He seemed to understand something. The sky-high fire curtain. The broken water left in the ruins. I disappeared. Damn it, it's a big deal now. Muttering in a low voice, Zhang Yang quickly got up and ran to the door while saying, I'm sorry Uncle Rayleigh, Shaki, I've caused you trouble. Don't worry, Garp and Borsellino are not here to find you. I'll go first. Well, see you next time. Bang. After speaking, Zhang Yang pushed the door heavily and left, leaving only Rayleigh and Shaki stunned, and then understood something. Did Garp and Borsellino come for him? Is he really Marine? Shaki looked at Rayleigh in shock. Hearing this, a strange color flashed in Rayleigh's eyes. Looking at the closed door, he suddenly smiled. Looks like there's going to be a great character in Marine. Chapter 48, Endless Ability. Since the incident of 13GR that happened yesterday afternoon, everyone has felt the change of Sabayati Archipelago, or the change of Marine stationed on Sabayati Archipelago. 13GR incident aroused the shock and attention of many people. It did not affect their normal life. Dark workers such as thieves and human traffickers are also doing their own thing, but the Marines are completely different from usual. After 13GR was published in the newspaper yesterday, a large number of Marines suddenly spread all over the Sabayati archipelago, as if they were looking for someone, and there was no exception to escape from the illegal zone. For a time, there were pirates and human traffickers on the Sabayati archipelago. Everyone was in danger, thinking that Marine was going to clean up the Sabayati archipelago. However, after some inquiries, they found out that Marine was not looking for a major cleaning of them, but was looking for a teenager who was about 13 or 14 years old in white casual clothes. Querelle is a Marine seaman first class. He is now seriously questioning the passers-by at 42GR, and then speaks out the flamboyant image described by Vasek Rear Admiral. Although the final answer is to shake his head, Querelle is there is no intention of giving up. Querelle, take a break. The companion on the side couldn't help but speak, but Querelle shook his head and continued to question passers-by with a firm face. Because in his heart, he has always had an ambition of his own, that is to get rid of the status of ordinary Marines and become a Marine officer, even the lowest non-commissioned officer, because only in this way can he have the face to return home and let his family live a better life. Originally, it was impossible for an ordinary sailor with little strength or background like him to become an officer in his entire life, but this time, Querelle felt that his chance had come. He has also heard some rumors about Major Zhang Yang from his companions and superiors. In addition, even Marine hero Garp Vice Admiral and Logia Flash Fruit Ability Borsellino Vice Admiral came early this morning, which made him realize that the Marine headquarters is very interested in Zhang Yang. Major's emphasis. If you can find the character that so many people are looking for, it shouldn't be a problem to become an officer, right? While the odds of finding it yourself are slim, if possible, it's worth trying. Oh, then look for it slowly. Let's go to rest for a while. The others completely scoffed at Querelle's thought, giving Querelle a mocking look one by one, then walked towards the bar with a low smile, leaving Querelle alone to continue his questioning. Suddenly, Querelle inadvertently swept across an alley, and when he saw a slender figure walking out, he couldn't help shaking his body, and his breathing became heavier. Colonel Zhang Yang. It's him, it must be him. After muttering a few words to himself, Querelle's face gradually filled with excitement, and he rushed over. The old man came here with Kizaru. What are you doing? I look like someone who burped so easily. While running out of the basement, Zhang Yang muttered with a big head. Originally, I just wanted to meet Rayleigh, but I didn't expect it to turn into this scene. Even the Marine headquarters was disturbed, and it made Garp and Borsellino come here. Now it's really bad. Could it be that when I saw Garp and Borsellino, I said to them with a smile on their faces, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's just a mistake I made accidentally, it's all right, everyone go back to their own homes and find their own mothers." Zhang Yang believed that as long as he dared to say so, Garp would definitely give him a punch without hesitation. Oh, forget it, leave him alone. Let's talk about it when the time comes, and go back now. With a helpless sigh, Zhang Yang realized that the exit of Rayleigh's basement was actually in a dirty alley. He secretly complained about Rayleigh's bad taste, and Zhang Yang walked out. Then, before he could figure out where it was, just as he walked out of the alley, he saw a young sailor running towards him excitedly, shouting at Major Zhang Yang as he ran. The young sailor was naturally Querelle, so he ran in front of Zhang Yang, and the excited Querelle Vivi gasped and looked at Zhang Yang. At the age of 13 or 14 years old, he was wearing a pair of torn white trousers, and his upper body was naked. Although he was not all white, Querelle was sure that the boy in front of him was definitely the Major Zhang Yang that Marine was looking for everywhere. Is something wrong? Zhang Yang asked curiously, looking at the excited Querelle. Please, excuse me, are you Major Zhang Yang? Querelle asked quickly and respectfully. Although Zhang Yang was a head shorter than him, Querelle didn't dare to look down on him in any way. Well, it's me. Zhang Yang nodded, then paused to understand something, looked at Querelle and said, Is it Vasan Rear Admiral who came to find me? Yes, Major Zhang Yang, please wait a moment, I will inform Vasek Rear Admiral. Seeing Zhang Yang nod, Quirrell became even more excited, and quickly took out the phone bug from his pocket, and then dialed Vosk's phone bug. On the other side, Vosk was personally helping the Marines to find Zhang Yang when he suddenly received news from Quirrell. After being stunned for a while, his face was overjoyed. "Quello Seaman First Class, you have done a great job, and now please ask Major Zhang Yang to return to the branch, and I will apply for the rank of sergeant for you." Vosker said this, he hung up the phone bug, and then hurriedly dialed Garp and Borsellino's phone bug to tell them the news. As for Quirrell, looking at the phone bug who hung up, after being stunned for a moment, his face suddenly became overjoyed. It worked. He's really going to be an officer. He can return home. Major Zhang Yang. Quirrell was about to say something, but Zhang Yang shook his hand and said, "I heard it all, let's go. Go back." With that said, Zhang Yang took the lead and walked towards 63GR. Seeing this, Quirrell quickly followed. An hour later, 63GR, in Vosk's office, sat helplessly on the sofa and narrated facts, while on the sofa opposite him, Garp and Borsellino were sitting. As for Vosk Rear Admiral, Por can only stand behind Garp and Borsellino. At this time, as Zhang Yang told the fact of why he suddenly disappeared, whether it was Garp, Borsellino or Vosk, they all looked like they had seen a ghost. After all, what Zhang Yang said was really amazing. That's the way it is. Zhang Yang took a sip of tea as usual, and said lightly. There was silence in the office, and for a while, Garp burst into laughter. Borsellino and Vosk also looked at Zhang Yang with strange eyes. For this kind of reaction, Zhang Yang was not surprised. He raised his eyebrows and said, "You don't believe me." "It's not that I don't believe it, it's just that your words, Major Zhang Yang, are too hard to believe. I went to 13GR to see it, and it was severely destroyed by fire. As far as I know, Major Zhang Yang should not have this ability, right?" Borsellino said slowly. "Road. Ha ha ha, you don't have to tell lies if you don't want to tell the truth. You fought with Rayleigh. I don't know your strength yet, just because you want to fight with Rayleigh. That's 100 too early. Years." Garp also laughed in disbelief. "Really?" An inexplicable smile appeared at the corner of Zhang Yang's mouth, and then he suddenly raised his hand and pointed between Garp and Borsellino. The four white thunders of breaking the way. Crackle. A white thunder column the thickness of a baby's arm shot out from Zhang Yang's fingertips, shot through between Garp and Borsellino, and directly penetrated the wall. Whoosh. A second later, the violent sound of breaking through the air entered everyone's ears. In an instant, Garp was stunned, Borsellino was stunned, and Vosk was stunned, and a thought appeared in their minds, "Guro guro no mi, rumble rumble fruit." However, they haven't waited for them to relax. The 20 breaking heaven sphere. Zhang Yang's voice came over again, and then, a golden energy ball shot out from Zhang Yang's hand, and then shot out from between Garp and Borsellino. Boom. There was an explosion, a strong hurricane blew, and the wall behind the two shattered suddenly, revealing the outside scene. Glitter fruit. Borsellino was dumbfounded. However, this is just the beginning, because after that, various fireballs, whirlwinds and other attacks were released one after another from Zhang Yang's hands, and the entire office was directly destroyed, but no one said anything. Because whether it was Vosk, Garp, or Borsellino, there was only one thought in his mind at the moment. What the hell is going on with this shit? Chapter 49 Paramesha Fantasy Fruit. Boom, boom, boom. 63GR Marine is stationed in the huge Marine branch base. One after another loud noises are constantly heard. All the Marines look up and see that the office of the best commander here is constantly flying out of various flames, lightning and explosions, one by one. Hey, isn't it a little weird? Do you want to take a look? A sea soldier looked up at the office where a large hole was punched, and the fire and lightning were constantly flying out of the office, and swallowed. Yeah, could it be that something happened inside? Another sailor also said dumbly. How about, let's go and see, another Marine suggested. What are you looking at? do you want to die? A sailor came over and asked. He looked up at the office that kept exploding and said with a familiar look, it must be the Garp vice admirals who are discussing. We don't want to go and disturb them. What are you going to do? Oh, that's what it is. When the other sailors heard the words, they immediately nodded in understanding. As a result, while the explosions continued to occur in the commander's office, the sailors didn't seem to see or hear it. The patrolling and the execution of the mission were very strange. And in the office, the 6,200-step railing of the binding road. Whoosh whoosh. Nearly 10 light rods were formed in the air as Zhang Yang's arm swayed, and then lost out, directly and tightly nailed to the wall. Huh. After doing all this, Zhang Yang took a few breaths and wiped the sweat from the corners of his eyes. The surging spiritual power in his body calmed down, and he sat back on the sofa again. Sending out more than a dozen ghost paths in a row like this is not a particularly advanced ghost path, but even with the current publicity strength, it is tiring to consume so much spiritual power in a short period of time, but... Turning his head and looking at the messy office, he looked at Garp, Borsellino, and Vosk who were staring at him with wide-eyed eyes, and a smile appeared on the corner of his open mouth. In fact, this is all on purpose, otherwise, why do you think Zhang Yang would suddenly be full and support so many ghosts? As for the reason for doing this, it is very simple, naturally it is for the better use of ghosts and flowing swords in the future. He was thinking about this when he was still in Marine Academy. The 4 basic abilities of the Shinigami Zanquan and Zanpakuto are the only things that can be easily accepted in the world of One Piece, King of Pirates. And Shunbu, as for Kido and Zanpakuto, for Zhang Yang, who was still in Marine Academy at the time, there was really no reason to explain it. This is why he has always only used kendo, white play and katana. The reason for the momentary step. If the use of ghosts and flow is like fire in an open and honest manner, this is a question that Zhang Yang has been thinking about all the time. After all, his current strength is not strong enough to ignore everyone, and now that he is in Marine, some issues still need to be considered. And this time, after so many problems with the battle with Rayleigh, he suddenly had an idea. Why don't you take this opportunity to reveal the Ghost Way and Ryer and Ruahuo? In this way, not only the 13GR incident is perfectly explained, but also the problem of ghosts and ruthlessness is perfectly solved. As for how to explain this ability later, Zhang Yang already has a bottom line. That's too far. Zhang Yang thought about it a lot, but it only took dozens of seconds, and by this time, the 3 of Garp had come back to their senses, but all 3 of them stared at Zhang Yang with disbelief. Stinky boy, what was that just now? Garp looked at the devastated office around him, recalling the flames, lightning, and gust of wind just now, and he couldn't calmly look at Zhang Yangdao for a long time. Those abilities just now are undoubtedly the abilities of devil fruits, but he is also a person with rich experience. Most of the devil fruits in the Devil Fruits Illustrated book are familiar with them. No matter how bad they are a little impressed, but he can't see what Zhang Yang showed just now. What kind of devil fruit is it? And it can launch various Logia fruit attacks, which is completely impossible. Borsellino and Vosik had similar thoughts, both staring at Zhang Yang, waiting for his answer. Seeing that the 3 of them looked over, Zhang Yang gently isho, and said the answer he had already prepared. I ate the devil fruit, the Paramesha fantasy fruit, and I can use the powers I imagined in my mind into reality. Zhang Yang's face was as usual, and his light and fluttering words made the eyes of the 3 people on the opposite side almost pop out. Devil fruit. Paramesha fantasy fruit. Ability to turn fantasy into reality. There is such a mess of devil fruit. Garp, Borsellino, and Vosik thought in shock, but in their hearts, they accepted this statement. Devil fruit has always been an unsolved mystery for human beings. I don't know the source, I don't know the principle, I don't know how much it has, and how many unheard of abilities it has. Although Zhang Yang's ability shown just now is exaggerated, if he uses devil fruit to explain it, it is not unacceptable. Otherwise, do you want them to believe that it is to show off their own ability? It's really surprising, Major Zhang Yang. I didn't expect that such a foolish devil fruit would still exist in the world. After being explained, Borsellino also regained a leisurely look, looking at Zhang Yang slowly. Well, I'm also quite surprised. Zhang Yang also pretended to be a certain person, recalling, I was suddenly hungry when I walked to the beach yesterday, and I happened to see a fruit floating over, and I didn't think about it at the time. I just ate so much, I didn't expect it to be a devil fruit. Quote. Haha, luck is also a kind of strength. Garp laughed, but then he thought of something, and continued with a serious face. But Zhang Yang, you have to remember that although the power of the devil fruit is powerful, you must not rely too much on it. It is not in this sea. The devil fruit family is dominant, and if you want to become a real powerhouse, you must not forget this. Quote. I understand. Zhang Yang nodded earnestly, although he said that Ruo Ren Ruo Huo and Ghost Path are not devil fruit abilities. Now that the matter is settled, Mr. Garp, are we ready to go back? The Marshal is still waiting for news from us. At this time, Borsellino stood up and said. Hearing this, Garp nodded, stood up and smiled at Zhang Yang. If that's the case, then we'll go back. As for Rayleigh. Having said that, Garp shook his head, did not continue speaking, turned and left here. Borsellino nodded to Zhang Yang, and walked out. In the office, only Zhang Yang and Vosk were left. Huh. Seeing Garp and Borsellino leave, Zhang Yang breathed a sigh of relief, and then showed a smile. It seems that the devil fruit has been fooled, and in the future, I can finally use the ghost path and the sword-like fire. Moreover, although the incident today made him a little dumbfounded, he also felt that Vivi felt warm in his heart. To be honest, he was really moved by Marine being able to have such a reaction when he learned that he was gone. Sometimes being a Marine is actually pretty good. Inexplicable issue in his heart, Zhang Yang stood up and said to Voss, Voss, Rear Admiral, did you see my saber at 13 GR? Oh, here it is. Vosk hadn't recovered yet. When he heard Zhang Yang's words, he subconsciously took the broken water on the desk and handed it to Zhang Yang. Thanks a lot, then I'll go first, Vossic Rear Admiral. Holding the broken water, Zhang Yang thanked Voss, and then turned to leave, leaving Voss alone in the messy office. After a while, Vossic came back to his senses, looking at the messy office and suddenly wanting to cry without tears. The fusion of Reiatsu and Haki. Blue sky, white clouds, today is another good weather. Before you know it, several days have passed since the 13 GR incident. As Marine issued a statement that the main culprit has been caught, the 13 GR incident has gradually faded out of people's sight. After all, in this era of pirates, there are so many incidents like this that they are almost numb. Only after tea and dinner will occasionally people talk about the sky-high fire curtain they saw that day. As for 13 GR, because the whole area has completely become a piece of coke, and even the main mangrove trees have died and are in danger of collapse at any time, so it has been listed by Marine as a sign of static entry. As for what happens there after that, I don't care. In this way, Sabayati Archipelago has returned to its former calm again, but some places are still extremely noisy. Bang bang bang. Number 63 GR, on the wide training ground of the Marine Division base, a group of Marines lined up to shoot continuously, but the target of their shooting was not a target, but a boy who looked only about 14 years old. The young man is dressed in white casual clothes, his handsome face is full of calm, his eyes are closed, and he is holding a very delicate long knife in his left hand. He wiped his clothes and was avoided. Even if he didn't, the unsheathed long knife in the boy's hand was swung, and with a ding sound, the bullet was ejected directly. If there is a hockey master at this time, you will definitely be able to feel the strong hockey fluctuations emanating from the boy. This scene directly made other Marines who were training stunned. Although I saw this scene a few days ago, it was not so exaggerated before, right? Okay, it's time to stop. Suddenly, the boy opened his eyes and gave a light drink, and the Marines immediately stopped shooting and put away their guns. The young man opened his eyes, glanced at the densely packed bullet casings on the ground, waved his hands while thinking about something, and said, "Go back to your posts first." "Yes, Major Zhang Yang." Saluted in unison, and then left the place in an orderly manner. That's right, this young man is none other than Zhang Yang. As for what Zhang Yang was doing just now, it's very simple, hockey's training. That's right, it's hockey. When Zhang Yang went to find Rayleigh last time, he chose to do it with Shaki's. On the one hand, it was because of Shaki's actions, but the bigger reason was because Zhang Yang wanted to feel hockey up close and see what kind of thing it was. What kind of existence. The final result was very good. Under the intentional perception, Zhang Yang really felt armament hockey and observation hockey. In just a few days, Zhang Yang has learned to use armament hockey and observation hockey initially. However, these are not the key. The point is, because of learning observation hockey and armament, Zhang Yang discovered that hockey and reiatsu are too similar. Reiatsu is a term for the size, quality, and quality of spiritual power. It is similar to the relationship between magic elements and magic power. Reiki is not only the source of death's power, but can also be used to simply exert coercion on the enemy, and even cause the enemy's death. Fear and will collapse. Gathering reiatsu in one place in the body can greatly enhance strength and defense, perceive the surrounding reiatsu, and feel the movements and positions of others. Hockey, this is an innate power of the human body. Strong people may not be able to hockey, but those who can hockey are basically strong. Armament hockey can form an invisible armor on the surface of the body, enhancing the human body's strength. Strength and defense. Observation hockey is to listen to the special voice of the human body to predict the actions of others and even listen to the voice of the heart, while conqueror hockey is to use spirit to shock the enemy, to coerce the enemy or even directly defeat its will. Gathering reiatsu somewhere and armament hockey, sensing reiatsu and observation hockey, reiatsu shock and conqueror hockey, how similar is that? Except for conqueror hockey's inferiority and reiatsu deterrence, other observation hockey and armament abilities far exceed reiatsu's ability to improve attack defense and sense trends. So, Zhang Yang was thinking, can hockey and reiatsu be integrated? As long as the fusion is successful, Zhang Yang's strength will definitely be greatly improved. Just how to do it? Zhang Yang ignored the Marines around him, completely immersed in one's world, frowned, walked to the stone bench beside the training ground and sat down, thinking secretly in his heart. Everyone has Reiki, but it can enhance spiritual power, but only the god of death can be promoted. Hockey is also available to everyone, but most people can't use it in their entire lives. If you compare Reiki to hockey, reiatsu comes from spiritual power, so what does hockey come from? Quote. Zhang Yang held Duan Shui in his arms and touched his hand, recalling the explanation of hockey in the anime. Hockey is a potential ability that everyone is born with. After awakening, in addition to Conqueror, observation hockey and armament can be enhanced gradually, and Conqueror will also grow with the growth of one's own aura, that is, the human body. If you compare armament to momentum, observation hockey to breath, and Conqueror to deterrence, then it's easy to understand. Quote. In the final analysis, whether it is hockey or reiatsu, it is the use of a kind of energy, but the control method is different. It is possible to hit the devil fruit because hockey is an energy attack. Since it is an energy attack, then why not try to control reiatsu the way you control hockey? Thinking of this, a flash of light suddenly flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. He walked to the wall beside the training ground, tried his best to recall the feeling of using armament hockey, and then used the same method to control reiatsu to wrap his right fist, without much use strength, knock against the wall. Boom. As soon as Zhang Yang's fist came into contact with the wall, it was like an explosion of compressed gas. The 2-meter diameter area on the wall collapsed sharply with Zhang Yang's fist as the center, forming a circular hole, and countless spider cracks spread. And then the whole wall collapsed suddenly, which shocked the Marines who were training. Success. It's actually feasible. Looking at the power caused by his light punch, Jong Young was stunned for a moment, and instantly became excited. Can use hockey's control method to control the spiritual power, which means that his previous conjecture is completely correct. He can use the spiritual power to use hockey, and because it is the spiritual power that motivates hockey, the power is even completely above the general hockey. With this new hockey, the shortcomings of the lack of physical strength can be completely made up for. After being excited for a while, Jong Young calmed down, then closed his eyes, and used the method of controlling observation hockey to control his spiritual power to perceive the surrounding situation. Suddenly, white figures appeared in his perception, and everyone on the training ground, every move appeared in his perception. Observation hockey is fine too. Quote. Jong Young opened his eyes, an unconcealed smile appeared on his face. Observation hockey and armament hockey with spiritual power, and is stronger than ordinary hockey, which is definitely an extremely important discovery for him. As for conqueror hockey, because I don't understand the principle, Jong Young is too lazy to study it. Anyway, Reiatsu is stronger than it. I just don't know if the hockey activated with spiritual power is useful to those with devil fruit abilities. After being excited, Jong Young frowned again and said, although he speculated that hockey is an energy attack that restrains the devil fruit, but after all, it is speculation, nothing is absolute, and the final result has to be tried to determine. Tsubayadi Archipelago is a transit station in the New World, and there must be devil fruit-capable people. Not to mention Logia and Paramesha, the most common zone can at least be found. Whether the new hockey can work on devil fruit power users, just try it. Thinking to himself, Jong Young stood up and just wanted someone to investigate where there are many pirates, but Garp's Reiatsu suddenly appeared in his perception. Why is the old man here again? Feeling that Garp had entered the base, Jong Young could not help muttering strangely, then hesitated, and walked towards Garp's direction. Chapter 51 Gorosei, 5 Elders Summoned. It seems that because of learning observation hockey Reiatsu, Jong Yang's perception of the surrounding is much clearer than before with pure Reiatsu perception. This kind of, feeling made him unable to resist hockey. Surprised by the existence of things. While carefully feeling this magical perspective, Jong Young walked towards Garp's position. At the same time, Garp also seemed to be aware of his position and walked towards him as well. After a while, at a corner, Jong Young saw Garp. Old man, why are you here again? Jong Young looked at Garp strangely. You think I'm willing to come? If it wasn't for Senbei, oh no, if it wasn't for the request of that old guy from Kong, I wouldn't be too lazy to come. Garp said with the same dissatisfaction. Jong Young suddenly heard black lines, Shanbei. This old guy just said Senbei. No need to guess, it must be Kong who used Senbei as an exchange to ask Garp to come to him, but it has been a few days since the 13GR incident. What will happen to Kong now that he asks Garp to come to him? So what? What's the matter with the marshal asking you to come to me? Jong Young said in a yin and yang tone. His indescribable tone and expression immediately made Garp blow his beard and stare at him, clenching his fists. I was about to freak out, but then I suddenly thought of something, grabbed Jong Young and said, forget it, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you, now hurry up with me. That kid Kuzan is still waiting on the boat. With that said, Garp pulled Jong Young and was about to leave. This time, Jong Young, who had wanted to try armament spiritual pressure through Garp, was surprised. The old man didn't get angry. What kind of wind is this blowing? Or, is there really something important this time? Wait. After being stunned for a moment, Jong Young broke free from Garp's big hand, rubbed his aching shoulders, and said to Garp in dissatisfaction, of course you can go, but at least you have to talk about what you are going to do. Alas, you boy is trouble. Garp glared at Jong Young, but still told the story. It turned out that, in the final analysis, it was because of some fantasy fruit that Jong Young had talked about a few days ago and the fact that he had fought with Rayleigh. When Garp and Borsellino went back and told Kong about these two things, Kong was shocked and still told the incident. Informed Gorosei, 5 elders, the supreme ruler of the world government. After all, eating an unheard of fantasy fruit and retreating after a battle with Rayleigh, for Zhang Yang, who has already been highly valued by the Marine headquarters, no matter which one is Kong can be responsible for alone. Now, this matter must be notified to the Gorosei, 5 elders of the world government, and let them decide the status of Zhang Yang in the future. And after Kong notified all the information about Zhang Yang to the world government, the Gorosei, 5 elders issued an order on the spot to bring Zhang Yang to the Holy Land Mariajoy, and they had to meet Zhang Yang in person to draw the final conclusion. After that, in this scene, Kong handed over the task of taking Zhang Yang to Mariajoy to Garp and Kuzan. Gorosei, 5 elders. After listening to Garp's words, Zhang Yang's eyes suddenly flashed with surprise. He didn't expect that it was the Gorosei, 5 elders who wanted to summon him. I don't know much about Gorosei, 5 elders Zhang Yang. After all, in the anime, Gorosei, 5 elders appear too few times. All he knows, only Gorosei, 5 elders are the rulers of the world government. The others' information about what kind of strength, etc., is even more unknown. But one thing is certain, Gorosei, 5 elders definitely have super strength. After all, in a world like One Piece, king of pirates that speaks by strength, as the ruler of a supergiant organization that rules the world, it is completely impossible to say that strength is not good. But Zhang Yang doesn't care. Let's not talk about whether Gorosei, 5 elders is going to target him this time. Even if it is, Zhang Yang is not afraid at all now. After all, Zhang Yang now has such a powerful weapon as a fire. Zhang Yang believes that, even if the Gorosei, 5 elders are strong like monsters, in a short time, with the power of the fire, he can leave safely even if he loses. Thinking of this, Zhang Yang showed a slight smile on the corner of his mouth and said, since it's the Gorosei, 5 elders who want to see me, then of course I have to go. Garp didn't know the many thoughts that flashed in Zhang Yang's mind. Seeing that Zhang Yang had no opinion, he left the military base with Zhang Yang and came to the coast of 63GR, where a warship had already docked and waited, and under the shadow of the warship, Kuzan was sitting lazily on a rock. Mr. Garp, Major Zhang Yang. Seeing Garp and Zhang Yang, Kuzan stood up lazily and greeted Garp and Zhang Yang in the name of Heish. Kuzan Vice Admiral. Zhang Yang also said hello, but Garp, who didn't even bother to talk about Kuzan, said with a dissatisfied look, don't do this, I've already brought you Zhang Yang, let's go. After that, Garp didn't wait for Kuzan to answer, and directly pulled Zhang Yang onto the boat. Kuzan was obviously used to Garp's character and didn't care, nodded and followed. There are not many Marines on the deck, just enough to meet the number of people operating the equipment of the warship, so it looks very spacious. After getting on the boat, Garp didn't even care about Zhang Yang, and rushed into the cabin with drooling. Is Senbei so attractive? Completely unable to understand Garp's behavior, Zhang Yang shook his head and muttered. Major Zhang Yang, I'll go to bed first. If you need anything, just tell the sailors. At this time, Kuzan also went to the side chair and lay down. After saying this to Zhang Yang, he took a blindfold from the table beside the chair and put it on, and fell asleep directly under the sun. Looking at this scene, Zhang Yang suddenly didn't know what to say. There are indeed many powerful people in the One Piece, King of Pirates world, but there are also many people with eccentric personalities, such as these two on the ship now. Fortunately, the other sailors consciously sailed after seeing a few people on board, otherwise there would be no one to give the order, then it would really be a fool. Alas! Silently sighed, Zhang Yang shook his head, turned and walked towards the cabin. Now the environment just happens to be quite quiet, find a room to have a knife. Otherwise, it would be bad if Shikai was suddenly dismissed when fighting, and it was just right. You could also take the opportunity to see what the sword spirit of Ryer and Ruahuo looked like. I thought with some anticipation in my heart, but just after walking a few steps, Zhang Yang suddenly took a step, thought of something, and looked at Kuzan lying on the chair with a strange expression on his face. Didn't I say that I wanted to test whether Haki, which uses spiritual power, would be useful to devil fruit users? Is there one here, and it is the Logia with the best experimental effect? Hey. Thinking of this, Zhang Yang stopped without hesitation, turned to look at Kuzan, and let out a burst of laughter that made the surrounding Marines horrified. Chapter 52 Not yet. In devil fruits, Logia is recognized as the invincible fruit, because it can make the ability person elementalize itself, and all physical attacks are invalid to it. Even if it does not attack, it can be in an invincible position. Of course, nothing is absolute, but Haki's appearance breaks this iron rule. No one knows how Haki appeared, and no one knows what Haki is, but what they all know is that the attack attached to Haki can touch the entity of the Logia devil fruit ability, completely breaking Logia's invincibility. Myth. And Zhang Yang's Haki is motivated by spiritual power. Although the principle is the same, it is not the original Haki after all. To be honest, Zhang Yang has no idea whether he can deal with elementalization. But it doesn't matter, there is a ready-made experiment in front of you now. Hey. Looking at Kuzan lying on the armchair, Zhang Yang let out a horrific cry and walked to Kuzan's side, holding the broken water in his left hand, and raised his right hand with a fist. Armament Reiatsu. Hum. An invisible force wrapped around Zhang Yang's fist, the corner of his mouth twitched, and then a punch hit Kuzan's chest directly. Boom. A loud bang sounded on the plywood. Under the stunned expressions of the sailors, Kuzan was hit by Zhang Yang. The plank broke and turned over. Kuzan Vice Admiral. After being stunned for a moment, the Marines immediately reacted. They looked at Zhang Yang holding his fists and the broken splint in front of him in disbelief. Just as they were about to rush up, Kuzan's lazy voice came over again. Well, don't be nervous, I'm fine. Kuzan's voice came out of the cave, and then he pulled one hand on the splint, and Kuzan, who was still wearing a blindfold, climbed out of it, and on his chest, the white ice block was getting smaller. Then disappeared. Major Zhang Yang, is there something wrong? Kuzan took off the blindfold, patted the dust on his body, and then scratched his head and hit Heish, as if he hadn't woken up, and didn't care about the attack just now. It's nothing, just heard from Garp Vice Admiral that Kuzan Vice Admiral is amazing, so I wanted to try it out. I'm really sorry for disturbing your sleep. Zhang Yang scattered Haki in his hands, and said embarrassedly. So that's the case, well, since it's all right, I'll continue to sleep. Kuzan said lazily, then reclined on the splint in front of Zhang Yang, and fell asleep with his head on his hands. Seeing this, Zhang Yang twitched the corners of his mouth, then turned around and walked directly into the cabin. And after Zhang Yang left, Kuzan Vivi opened one eye and murmured, "What a strange Haki, it hurts a little." After saying that, Kuzan turned his body in a different direction, closed his eyes and went back to sleep. At the same time, on the other side, Zhang Yang, who walked into the cabin, clenched his fists while walking, with a smile on his face. Although Kuzan used elementalization just now, Zhang Yang could still clearly feel that his fist really felt like hitting Kuzan's body. Although it didn't cause any damage to it, it did hit Kuzan's body. This means that his spiritual power Haki completely possesses the ability of the original Haki, and can also attack Logia's body. This made Zhang Yang very satisfied. Although it is said that if Shikai he is not necessarily able to deal with the ability of the element, but in this way, even if not Shikai, he will not be helpless when encountering the ability of Logia. Haki's matter is settled, the next step is Daochan. Zhang Yang murmured, and then walked to the cabin area where the officer lived. He found a random door and walked in. He didn't look at what was in the room, and sat down on the bed with his legs crossed. Daochan, this is a ceremony for the god of death to communicate with Zanpakuto, and it is also a way for the god of death to improve his strength. By communicating with the sword spirit of Zanpakuto, it is recognized by it. The deeper the degree of recognition, one can use Shikai. The more time, strength and ability of the sword, and even the spiritual power will be enhanced to a certain extent by its influence. If you can realize the sword spirit tool to disappear and defeat him, it will be able to reach the level of Bankai. Ruo Ren Ruahuo was originally the Zanpakuto of the Commander-in-Chief, but it was only because the Commander-in-Chief linked Lu Ren Ruahuo with Zhang Yang, and Zhang Yang knew the name of Lu Ren Ruahuo to complete Shikai, but this has great drawbacks. For example, Shikai suddenly disbanded when he fought with Rayleigh last time. This is the consequence of Shikai without a sword. And now, Zhang Yang intends to make up for this drawback. Sitting crosswise on the bed, Zhang Yang put the broken water aside, and then made a move with one hand, and Lu Ren Ruohuo instantly appeared in his hand. Pulling out Liu Ren Ruohuo, putting the scabbard aside, Zhang Yang glanced at the cold blade of Liu Ren Ruohuo, then placed it on his lap, closed his eyes, and followed the feeling in the memory of the Commander-in-Chief. The consciousness sank into the flames. A little bit of time passed, and suddenly, Zhang Yang, who closed his eyes, suddenly felt his eyes light up, and his vision changed, and he found that he appeared in a thick fog, and there was nothing in all directions. This is my inner world. Looking at the strange space surrounded by thick fog, Zhang Yang murmured strangely. Not yet. A voice that could not tell the gender and age suddenly sounded in Zhang Yang's ears. Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, and turned around abruptly, only to find that it was still a dense fog and nothing. Zhang Yang frowned and didn't panic, because he knew that the sound should be the sound of a fire. Are you a flaming fire? Can you come out and meet me? I have something to tell you. Zhang Yang shouted tentatively. Not yet, not yet, not yet. The voice sounded again, but this time it was not in Zhang Yang's ears, but came from all directions. Then, before Zhang Yang could say anything, the overwhelming flames suddenly came from all directions, and the terrifying high temperature melted Zhang Yang in an instant. At the same time, in the room, Zhang Yang also abruptly opened his eyes, took a long breath, frowned and picked up Lu Ren Ruohuo. Not yet. What do you mean? Zhang Yang murmured suspiciously. If he guessed correctly about the situation just now, Lu Ren Ruohuo should have driven him out. But why is this? With his spiritual power, he should be able to Shikai, right? What does Lu Ren Ruohuo mean when he says no? Various possibilities flashed through his mind. Zhang Yang was about to try again, but the door was kicked open with a bang, and Garp walked in carelessly. Old man, what are you doing here? Zhang Yang's observation Haki Reiatsu didn't spread too much, so when he saw Garp suddenly come in, he said with dissatisfaction. What else can I do? Of course I'm getting off the boat. Garp completely ignored Zhang Yang's words and said dissatisfiedly, and then saw the flaming blade in Zhang Yang's hand, and suddenly said strangely, where did you get a knife? It's made by the power of the fruit. Zhang Yang said with a normal expression, and then retracted Lu Ren Ruohuo back into the scabbard. With a thought, Lu Ren Ruohuo disappeared in his hand. What a strange ability. Seeing this, Garp muttered. Now that he had arrived, Zhang Yang had no choice but to give up and continue with Daochen. He followed Garp with broken water and walked to the plywood. A huge red wall that could not see the top suddenly appeared in front of him. Red Continent. Looking up at this magnificent red wall, Zhang Yang couldn't help but exclaimed. Chapter 53 The Holy Land Mariajoy. The Red Earth continent is a huge crimson continent that divides the Great Channel and even the entire world into two halves. It has two intersections with the Great Channel. The first is the Upside-Down Mountain. For pirates who cannot pass through the windless belt, this is greatness. The entrance to the waterway, and the second intersection, is the seat of Mariajoy, the Holy Land of the world government. This is the first time that Zhang Yang has seen the Red Earth continent in the true sense. It is different from the feeling in the anime. Just at a glance, Zhang Yang can't help but marvel at the magnificence of the Red Earth continent. Ha, you must have been frightened. I think the first time I saw the Red Earth continent was more exaggerated than your expression. Seeing Zhang Yang staring at the Red Earth continent with a surprised look, Garp laughed aside. Zhang Yang glanced at Garp and ignored him. Mr. Garp, Major Zhang Yang, let's disembark first. Kuzan said lazily, scratching his head. Oh yes, go down. Garp then remembered that there was still business, and then hurriedly had the splint put down. At the same time, Zhang Yang found out where he was docked, a dock under the red soil continent. Zhang Yang suddenly felt a little surprised. If he landed in such a place, how could he go to the top of the red soil continent? Is it to climb up? Laughing to himself, Zhang Yang dismissed this somewhat whimsical idea. Not to mention them, the Holy Land Mariajoy is where the Tenryubitos live, and Zhang Yang does not believe that the world government will allow Tenryubito to climb the Red Earth continent. Besides, Tenryubito is not Fisher Tiger. Even if they want to climb, they can't climb it at all. But there is no need to make random guesses. Let's get off the boat first, and the answer will be revealed automatically later. Shaking his head, Zhang Yang threw away all the thoughts in his mind and followed Garp and Kuzan off the ship. As for the other sailors, they were on standby on the warship. After getting off the boat, Zhang Yang realized that the dock was not built directly under the red soil continent, but a dock floating on the sea, the kind that can be moved at any time. The dock is very large and there are a large number of armed personnel on it, marine, and world government. The three got off the boat, and immediately a world government official in a black suit and hat ran over and respectfully said to the three of Zhang Yang, Garp Vice Admiral, Kuzan Vice Admiral, Major Zhang Yang, I'm. Stop talking nonsense and take us to Mariajoy. Garp said impatiently. The government official suddenly smiled awkwardly, and then hurriedly said, Yes, yes, please come with me. Then they took Zhang Yang and the three to the direction of the dock against the red soil continent. Looking at this scene, Zhang Yang pondered to himself, it seems that Marine and the world government do not belong to that kind of subordinate relationship. Although the orders issued by the general world government must be strictly enforced by Marine, the status between the two is actually not the same. There is no strict distinction between high and low, otherwise, even if Garp is strong, it is not very good to treat a government official like this. Of course, it's also possible that Garp doesn't care about that at all. While thinking about it, the three quickly came to the position between the dock and the Red Earth continent, and a huge iron gate embedded in the Red Earth continent appeared in Zhang Yang's eyes. This is... A strange look flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. He thought he had guessed how to get up. Garp and Kuzan looked as usual, since they had been here many times. Please wait a moment. 3. After arriving here, the government official smiled apologetically at Zhang Yang and the three, then took out a phone bug and started talking. A few minutes later, with the sound of the rumbling machine, the huge iron door began to open, revealing a space like a reception room inside, with sofas, tables and even beds. 3 people please come in. The government official made a gesture of invitation to the three of Zhang Yang. Let's go. Garp walked in first, followed by Zhang Yang and Kuzan. Afterwards, the government official said something to the phone bug. Amid the roaring sound of the machine, the huge iron gate was closed, and the place was immediately isolated from the outside, and it became quiet. Squeak. The entire space shook suddenly, followed by a slight sense of weightlessness. It really is an elevator. While looking at the surrounding arrangements, Zhang Yang pondered inwardly. This thing is probably used by Tenryubito, which is controlled by Mariajoy. Unless Mariajoy's permission is obtained, it is almost impossible to pass here. No wonder that if you want to go to the New World through Mariajoy, you need to abandon the ship and pay a lot of money. Barely in waiting for the application to be approved, it turned out to be the case. Zhang Yang rubbed his chin and guessed, but Garp beside him thought that Zhang Yang was nervous waiting for the meeting with Gorosei, 5 elders, patted Zhang Yang on the shoulder and laughed loudly. It turns out that you are also nervous sometimes. Don't worry, Gorosei, the 5 elders are nothing more than 5 immortals, and they haven't been malicious since this time, so don't be too nervous. I'm not nervous. Zhang Yang dodged Garp's big hand, the corners of his mouth twitched, calling Gorosei, 5 elders immortal, that's what this guy can say. Silently rolled his eyes at Garp, Zhang Yang sat down directly on the sofa, and began to close his eyes to rest. As for Kuzan, he has fallen asleep on the sofa since he came in. Nearly 10 minutes later, as the entire space vibrated slightly again, the elevator stopped and the door opened with the sound of a boom machine. It's already here. Kuzan rubbed his eyes and stood up as if he had not woken up. Zhang Yang glanced at him, and then the three of them walked out together. Suddenly, a scene like a fairyland appeared in front of the three of them. Under the blue sky and white clouds, a huge and exquisite castle stands quietly. Under the smog, houses with uneven heights are neatly arranged in front of the castle. A scene like a fairyland. This is a dream city that makes people unable to take their eyes off at first glance, which is the destination of Zhang Yang and others this time. Holy Land, Mariajoy. This is really astonishing. Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, suppressing the shock in his heart, and muttering with some sigh. Ha ha, surprise is normal, after all, this is where the descendants of the creators live. Garp laughed. Zhang Yang didn't refute this time. The scale of Mariajoy really shocked him a lot. Mr. Garp, Major Zhang Yang, let's go, the Gorosei 5 elders should already be waiting. Kuzan said. Hearing this, Zhang Yang recovered his mind, his expression returned to normal, he nodded, and the three walked into this holy city of the world together. And as he walked into Mariajoy, Zhang Yang also met the so-called Tenryubido for the first time, and it was not one or two. As this Tenryubido, the descendant of the creator. Zhang Yang frowned as he watched men and women dressed in white clothes like astronauts and wearing square transparent hoods walking by. Zhang Yang frowned, but he didn't do anything special. For Tenryubido, all he has is only disgust, not only because of their arrogance, but also because they treat other ordinary people completely as human beings and trample their lives. Although Zhang Yang never thinks he is a good person, he is better than Tenryubido. I don't know how much. Tenryubido only glanced at the arrival of the three of Zhang Yang, and didn't care when he saw the marine uniforms on the three of them. Obviously, it was not surprising that Marine came and went here. Looking at the Tenryubidos along the way, after dozens of minutes, the three walked to the huge castle. Come on, the Gorosei 5 elders are inside. Garp said to Zhang Yang, then walked in first. Chapter 54. The 90 Black Coffins of Destruction. People gather in groups and things are classified. This is an eternal truth that does not change no matter where you go, even in Mariajoy, the headquarters of the world government and the holy place where Tenryubido lives. Tenryubido and Tenryubido are not all the same. 800 years ago, 20 kings co-founded the world government, whose descendant is Tenryubido, and will be under the absolute protection of the world government for generations, but 800 years is enough to change anything. During the time under the protection of the world government, most Tenryubido began to spend their days and enjoy themselves. Its vassals. In Mariajoy, there has always been such a consensus that ordinary Tenryubido lived in the houses around the holy city of Mariajoy, while the three Tenryubido families lived in the holy city of Mariajoy together with the Gorosei 5 elders, the rulers of the world government. Mariajoy, which is the huge castle in the center of Mariajoy, and now Zhang Yang, together with Garp and Kuzan, came to the area belonging to the Gorosei 5 elders in the holy city of Mariajoy, and went to the location of the Gorosei 5 elders. On the way, listening to Garp tell these secrets about Mariajoy, Zhang Yang couldn't help being a little shocked. So, there are nobles and commoners in Tenryubido. Zhang Yang frowned as he looked at Garp, and at the same time he thought to himself, if you think of Garp, it is not so much that the world government is protecting Tenryubido, it is better that the world government is breathing in this gentle way to let Tenryubido go into perdition. After all, by now, Tenryubido has almost become a waste of pleasure and arrogance, right? No, it can't be said that. It seems that there are still 3 Tenryubido families that are still prosperous, so what are these Tenryubido's prosperous? Strength, or something else? Where are the world government and Tenryubido now? For a time, a flash of brilliance flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes, and he suddenly found that many things he had learned from the anime were very one-sided, and the world was far more complicated than he imagined. However, tightening the broken water in his hand, Zhang Yang's mood returned to calm again. No matter what Tenryubito and the world government were hiding, but he was no longer the one who had been needed before. No matter what awaited him in the future, he is confident that all will follow. Garp didn't know that Zhang Yang thought so much at this moment. Hearing Zhang Yang's words, he glanced at Zhang Yang and said, "Of course, but no matter how low their status is, they are still Tenryubito, and their status is still the highest in this world." Hearing this, Zhang Yang nodded thoughtfully. At this time, the three of them also came to a door with exquisite workmanship. "Okay, here it is, go in. Kuzan and I are waiting for you outside." Stopping in front of the gate, Garp said to Zhang Yang, and Kuzan also nodded to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang nodded, took a deep breath, adjusted his mood, and then pushed gate of opening with one hand and walked in. Suddenly, an unusually gorgeous hall appeared in his eyes. The hall is very wide, and it is not much different from the architectural style of Western castles. In the center of the hall is a circular carpet, and on the carpet, sofas made of going and various gems are placed on it. The old man in a black suit was sitting there quietly, watching Zhang Yang who pushed in the door. Gorosei, 5 elders. Zhang Yang's eyes narrowed, and he instantly recognized their identities. He subconsciously wanted to sense the other's spiritual pressure, but the perception had just been released. But Zhang Yang's expression changed because he clearly saw one of them was holding a cane, with an old man with egg rolls shrugged and Vivi suddenly opened to stare at him. The spiritual pressure perception was discovered. Zhang Yang's heart was full of shock. The sense of spiritual pressure that even Garp and others had not discovered at the beginning, was actually sensed by this Gorosei, 5 elders. How terrifying is the strength of Gorosei, 5 elders? No, not right. Zhang Yang soon discovered that something was wrong, because he found that the egg-roll-headed Gorosei, 5 elders discovered his perception, but the Gorosei, 5 elders did not move at all, and did not detect his perception at all. Could it be some kind of devil fruit ability? Zhang Yang guessed in his heart. Zhang Yang thought so much in an instant, but in fact it only took a moment. His expression returned to normal, and he silently took back his perception. Squeak. The door that was pushed open by Zhang Yang was also slowly closed under the action of some kind of device. Zhang Yang stood up, raised his hand to salute Gorosei, 5 elders, and said softly, "Major Zhang Yang of Marine Headquarters, say hello to Gorosei, 5 elders." Quote. "Hee, the momentum is good, very interesting little guy." An old chuckle sounded, and a Gorosei, 5 elders with long white hair and a long beard stood up, looked at Zhang Yang with a faint smile with his hands behind his back and said, "We have already read your information." After that, the slave was born, but has conqueror haki and extremely high kendo and physical skills, graduated 5 years early with excellent grades during the Marine Academy period, and was then appointed to the Sabayati archipelago. 3 days ago, he accidentally ate Paramesha fantasy fruit and battle with the Hades Rayleigh. The whole 13GR was reduced to scorched earth. Hee, what an unbelievable experience. Hearing the other party tell all his true information, Zhang Yang did not speak, and looked at Gorosei, 5 elders as usual. He knew that what Gorosei, 5 elders said next was the main purpose of coming to him today. Paramesha fantasy fruit. Turning fantasy into a vanishing fantasy person. After living for so long, this old man has never heard of such a nonsense ability. The other Gorosei, 5 elders, with short blonde hair and a beard, wearing a black suit without a tie, seemed younger than the other 4 Gorosei, 5 elders, stared at Zhang Yang with sharp eyes and said, "Zhang Yang. Major, I wonder if you can give us old men some insight. Since it's a request from the Gorosei, 5 elders, it's no problem." Zhang Yang's expression remained unchanged. He had long expected that the Gorosei, 5 elders would want him to show the ability of the fruit. After all, the name of the fantasy fruit is too big. However, there doesn't seem to be an attack target here. Zhang Yang looked around and frowned. "It's okay, just attack the old man directly." The blonde Gorosei, 5 elders said lightly, and Zhang Yang's eyes squinted. Now that he knows that he can fight Rayleigh and even turn 13GR into scorched earth, this guy dares to say that, is the strength of Gorosei 5 elders so exaggerated? Or, what special fruit ability does he have? Thinking to himself, Zhang Yang seemed to hesitate for a while, then nodded and said, that would be offended. After speaking, Zhang Yang looked at the blonde Gorosei 5 elders, took a deep breath, raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand, and looked at the blonde Gorosei 5 elders in the distance. His eyes narrowed and his lips moved slightly. Vaguely revealed turbid coat of arms, rebellious and arrogant talent, surging, negating, paralyzing, momentary, impeding long sleep, crawling iron princess, constantly self-mutilating clay doll, combining, rebounding, extending to the ground, knowing your own powerlessness. The 90 black coffins of destruction. As Zhang Yang shouted, the spiritual power in the body was rapidly consumed, and at the same time, the expressions of the 5 Gorosei 5 elders changed at the same time. Except for the blonde Gorosei 5 elders, the other 4 Gorosei 5 elders disappeared instantly, and then appeared at a place 10 meters away, the next moment. Swish! 4 huge black energy walls rose up from around the sofa, wrapping all the sofas and the blonde Gorosei 5 elders, including where the 4 Gorosei 5 elders were sitting just now, forming a 3-meter wide space. A huge black cuboid nearly 10 meters high, but this is not the end. Whoosh whoosh. Black spears formed around the black coffin, and then kept chasing into the black coffin at various angles. The tips penetrated from the other side, and an extremely depressing and powerful aura carried the airwaves in black. The coffin spreads out, blowing the hair and robes of the 5 Gorosei 5 elders. Huh. Zhang Yang let out a long breath with a pale face, and stood firm on his slightly weak body, looking at the huge black coffin in front of him, the corner of his mouth raised Vivi. Chapter 55 The Purpose of Gorosei 5 Elders. The 90 Black Coffins of Destruction. This is the highest level ghost way that Zhang Yang can use today. It uses spiritual power to form a black cube enchantment to block the enemy, and then attacks with thousands of blades and swords from the outside. It is a powerful and destructive ghost way. In the Shinigami anime, Aizen's hand was used for the first time when Aizen had just left the Soul Realm, but even an unsung black coffin can scar the strong body of the captain-level Komamura Sajin. Its power is evident. Although Zhang Yang's strength is far inferior to Aizen, he believes that the body of Gorosei 5 elders can't be as strong as a captain-level spirit body. 5 elders can't be intact, can they? Thinking of this, even though his face was a little pale due to the consumption of spiritual energy, Zhang Yang couldn't help showing a slight smile. As for why it is necessary to spend a lot of spiritual power to use the black coffin, it is very simple. First, to illustrate the power of fantasy fruit, and second, to remind Gorosei 5 elders that he is not the kind of small character who can be needed. Zhang Yang didn't know what the Gorosei 5 elders' attitude towards him was, but no matter what, the necessary power still needed to be shown. However, just as Zhang Yang was thinking about it, he suddenly found that the other 4 Gorosei 5 elders were very calm, as if they were not worried about the safety of the blonde Gorosei 5 elders at all. Is it? Zhang Yang's face changed slightly, and he quickly looked at the black coffin. Nice attack. A slightly amazed voice came from the black coffin, and then, in Zhang Yang Vivi's shrunken pupils. Click. Like shattered glass, a huge fist with strong hockey fluctuations directly blasted the black coffin out of a big hole, revealing the unscathed blonde Gorosei 5 elders inside. At the same time, countless cracks also spread rapidly on the black coffin. Then, with a bang sound, the entire black coffin shattered into pieces and disappeared into the air as little black starlight. How is it possible? Looking at the unscathed blonde Gorosei 5 elders, Zhang Yang was really shocked this time. With his complete chanting now, although the power is not as strong as when Aizen abandoned the chanting, it is not much different. However, this guy is actually intact. Zhang Yang clearly felt that the black coffin had indeed hit the blonde Gorosei 5 elders, but the other party was not damaged at all. No, it's impossible, no matter how strong he is, how could his clothes not be damaged at all? Forcing himself to calm down, Jong Young soon realized that something was wrong. The power of the black coffin is absolutely unquestionable. Even if it really can't hurt the blonde Gorosei, 5 elders, it is absolutely impossible for his clothes to remain intact, even if they are used, not possible without armament hockey. In this way, there is only one possibility. The ability of a devil fruit. Jong Young breathed a sigh of relief. He could accept that the black coffin was blocked by the unknown devil fruit ability, but if the Gorosei 5 elders could withstand the black coffin with their bodies alone, then Jong Young was really unacceptable. Many thoughts flashed through Jong Yang's mind. On the other side, the Gorosei 5 elders were also very uneasy, and the power of the black coffin was beyond their expectations. Although the black coffin did not hurt the blonde Gorosei 5 elders, the sofa they were sitting on was turned into pieces. You must know that it was made of various special materials such as going and gems, and the cannonballs would not leave any marks on it. What traces, but even so, it is still like this now. The power of the black coffin can be imagined. However, compared to the power of the black coffin, what he can care more about is the black coffin itself. According to Kong's information, Jong Young can not only use the black coffin, but also various other abilities such as lightning, wind, light ball, and even turning the ground over. As Jong Young said at the beginning, all kinds of fantasy abilities were used by him. Is this the power of fantasy fruit? It's a strange attack, and it's powerful. At this time, because the sofa shattered to the ground, the standing blonde Gorosei 5 elders also spoke up, looking at Jong Young and admiring. Fantasy fruit is indeed a powerful ability. Thanks for the compliment. Jong Young shook his head modestly, and at the same time breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that Gorosei 5 elders should also believe that his ability really came from the devil fruit, and the black coffin that he worked so hard to use was finally in vain. Okay, since I have seen the fantasy fruit, let's talk about the business. Suddenly, Gorosei 5 elders, wearing a black suit and mustache, spoke up. He looked at Jong Young and said, Major Jong Young. Actually, in addition to seeing you today, we have the ability to see the fruit of fantasy. Thing. Please speak. Jong Yang's pale face slowly returned to normal, and when he heard the words of Gorosei 5 elders, his expression became righteous. Upon seeing this, the 5 Gorosei 5 elders looked at each other, and then the Gorosei 5 elders, who had long hair and beards, said, Major Jong Young, your talent, strength, and character are all impeccable. Kong. He told us that he wants to train you to be the next admiral or even a marshal, and on your terms, he does have this qualification, but... Having said that, the Gorosei 5 elders glanced at the usual publicity and continued. Marine already has 3 Logia devil fruit powers. They can become the next admiral, and the current admirals also have all the powers. As a marshal's qualification, it can be said that Marine's power is already in a saturation period, so we decided after deliberation that we hope you can enter the world government to balance Marine's internal power. What do you think, Major Jong Young? Hearing this, Jong Young was stunned for a while, then his brows were slightly wrinkled, and he sneered in his heart. He now finally knew what the Gorosei 5 elders were up to. In fact, the purpose of Gorosei 5 elders bringing him here this time is not to see the ability of his fantasy fruit at all. The reason why they want to see the ability of fantasy fruit and let Jong Young attack them is just to show their power in front of Jong Young. Strength. As for the reason, it is very simple. They took a fancy to Jong Yang's potential and strength. Saying that Marine's internal strength is saturated, and saying that he needs to maintain balance, he really thinks he is just an ordinary 13 or 14-year-old kid. Doesn't he just see his potential and want to bring him into his subordinates? First use the force to easily break the black coffin to intimidate Jong Young, and then use the righteous pressure to maintain balance. If Jong Young is really just an ordinary teenager's mind, maybe he really agrees quickly. It's a pity that Jong Young is not an ordinary teenager, but a teenager with a mind in his 20s. He knows that once he joins the world government, I am afraid that the world government will train him as a cold-blooded killer in the future, or even brainwash him, and finally become like a humanoid weapon like Rob Lucci that only knows how to perform tasks. However, even though they knew the purpose of the Gorosei, 5 elders, they couldn't directly say no to the strong rejection. After all, the Gorosei, 5 elders were also the supreme rulers of the world today. Looking at the Gorosei, 5 elders who were waiting for his answer, Zhang Yang's heart moved, then his face became solemn, and he said solemnly, "I'm sorry, I can't agree." Oh. The Gorosei, 5 elders were stunned for a moment, but they didn't expect Zhang Yang to refuse. Among them, the mustache Gorosei, 5 elders frowned and said strangely, "Major Zhang Yang, you have to think about it carefully. Joining the world government, you will get a better environment to exercise yourself, and even stay in Mariajoy and enjoy the glory that no one else can imagine." Quote. "I don't need that." Zhang Yang shook his head with an unshakable expression. "My life was saved by Garp Vice Admiral. If first didn't have Marine, I wouldn't be where I am today. First can't leave Marine for my own benefit, so please forgive me and I can't promise your request. If this is the only thing the Gorosei, 5 elders are looking for with Zhang Yang, then Zhang Yang will leave first." After speaking, Zhang Yang looked a little angry, turned around, pushed the door open and walked out, leaving only the Gorosei, 5 elders with big eyes and small eyes. "What?" Gorosei, 5 elders looked at the other 4 and said. Hearing this, the mustache Gorosei, 5 elders shook his head, then looked at the blonde Gorosei, 5 elders and said, "How about the power of fantasy fruit?" That move just now was very powerful. The blonde Gorosei, 5 elders said solemnly, "If it wasn't for the fruit's ability, I'm afraid I would really lose face. I just don't know, what are the limitations of the fantasy of the fruit, and to what extent can it be achieved?" "You mean, that kid hasn't used his full strength yet?" the long-haired and bearded Gorosei, 5 elders asked in surprise. "That's for sure. It's not that you don't know Rayleigh's strength. If you just rely on that move, you can't be Rayleigh's opponent." Egg Roll said lightly. "Also, when he first came in, he seemed to have used it. Some special ability is spying on us." Fantasy fruit. The blonde Gorosei, 5 elders frowned. What a powerful fruit. It's such a waste of talent to put in Marine, and you have to figure out a way to get him over there. At this time, the bald swordsman Gorosei, 5 elders, who was wearing a samurai uniform and holding a long sword, also suddenly spoke up. He looked at the closed door, and there was a glint in his eyes. Also, his kendo attainments should not be low. Chapter 56 begins with Sabayati Archipelago. After graduating from Marine Academy in 1 year, with a Dao value of nearly 900, possessing a Conqueror Haki, plus the Paramesha fantasy fruit that he has never heard of, everything Zhang Yang has shown is really too evil. The world government that didn't get involved in Marine couldn't sit still. He has performed too well, and he knows this, but he is more aware of what the consequences will be if he joins the world government. People in high positions like to hold capable people in their hands, and Gorosei, 5 elders are no exception. They say that Zhang Yang can be better nurtured in the world government, let him live in Mariajoy, etc. In fact, it is for attracting Zhang Yang to their hands, becoming their weapon, and doing things for them is not what Zhang Yang wants. Now in Marine, although there are also many people on him, but because of the relationship between Garp and his own strength, basically he is still very free. Just like the last time he came to Sabayati Archipelago, Kong also gave orders after his opinion. At least until now, he has not received any coercive orders. In addition, Bastille and Tina are also in Marine, and he is also grateful to Garp and Zephyr. Now he, aside from Gorosei, 5 elders, has no intention of leaving Marine. I think when first joined Marine, I was thinking about when to quit Marine, but I didn't expect that I don't want to leave now. What a mess. As he pushed the door and walked out of the hall where the Gorosei, 5 elders were located, many thoughts flashed through Zhang Yang's mind, which finally turned into a silent chuckle. Coming out so soon. Outside the door, Garp and Kuzan were waiting. Seeing Zhang Yang pushing the door and walking out, Garp was a little surprised. Yeah, Zhang Yang retracted his mind and nodded. Those old. Oh no, What did the Gorosei, 5 elders tell you? Garp asked suddenly. It's nothing, I just asked about the devil fruit. Zhang doesn't care about the way. He didn't say anything about Gorosei, 5 elders going to dig Marine's corner. One is too lazy to say it, but it's useless to say it. Do you still expect Marine to strengthen yourself with the world government? Didn't say anything else. Garp frowned in disbelief. Nonsense, what do you think you need to say? Are you discussing how to eat senbei? Zhang said angrily. Stinky boy, what did you say? Garp suddenly stared at Zhang. This scene made Kuzan on the side look surprised for a while, thinking that when he wanted to talk to Mr. Garp like this, he would have been beaten to the ground by a punch. Nothing said nothing. Zhang waved his hand perfunctorily, then suddenly froze, looking at Garp who stared at him suspiciously. Old man, why do I feel that you are a little weird today? Why do you suddenly care so much about what I said to the Gorosei, 5 elders? Hearing this, Garp was taken aback for a moment, and then he said, ask, just ask. Really? Zhang felt that Garp was wrong the more he looked. But being stared at by Zhang, Garp suddenly felt uncomfortable, patted his head, as if remembering something and said, by the way, it's getting late, let's go back quickly. After that, Garp didn't wait for Zhang and Kuzan, and turned around and left. Well, then go back. Kuzan scratched his head lazily, then followed. Zhang glanced at Garp strangely, and then followed, but his intuition told him that the old man was definitely hiding something from him. Almost 40 minutes later, the three crossed Mariajoy, got into the elevator, and returned to the warship, going to the Sabayati archipelago. On the warship, Zhang leaned against the side of the ship with the broken water in his arms, and looked at Garp who passed by again but hesitated to speak, frowned, and finally couldn't help but say, Old man, what the hell are you doing? Hurry up and say what? Hearing this, Garp stopped and looked back at Zhang who frowned. After sighing, his face suddenly became serious, and he said solemnly, when I was in Mariajoy just now, did Gorosei, 5 elders let you leaving Marine to join the world government? How do you know? Zhang was stunned for a moment, but he didn't expect that this was what Garp had been saying all along. HMPH, how could I not know? Garp snorted coldly. The Gorosei, 5 elders, don't they just want to poach you when they see your potential? That guy Kong does too, he knows it. Giving your data to the world government will cause this situation, or you have to do it. Quote. Looking at a disgruntled Garp, Zhang was even more surprised this time. Kong and he already knew that the Gorosei, 5 elders would want him to join the world government. Then why didn't Garp tell him before going? Aren't you afraid that he really went to the world government? But after thinking about Zhang for a moment, I will understand. I am afraid that Kong is also trying to test whether Zhang is really focused on Marine. By the way, did you promise them in the end? After complaining about Kong, Garp remembered the most crucial question, frowned and asked Zhang seriously. Seeing this, Zhang gently shook his head and said, don't worry. I refused. Rejected. Garp's face disappeared instantly, and he was about to pat Zhang shoulder with a big laugh, but was avoided by the VV side of Zhang body. Garp didn't care. He laughed and said, good boy, as expected of a man I like. What is the world government? The world government is bullshit. All he knows is to pretend, Marine is the best. Garp's laughter spread throughout the entire warship, and the Marines were stunned for a while, and Zhang was speechless for a while, Marine calling the world government a piece of shit. I'm afraid that only Marine hero Garp has the guts. Blue blue blue. The sound of a phone bug came from Garp's arms. Garp, who was laughing, took out the phone bug and said in a good mood, who is it? It's me. Kong's voice came from the phone bug. Oh, it's Kong. Don't worry, that kid. Hearing Kong's voice, Garp glanced at Zhang and walked towards the cabin while laughing. Seeing this, Zhang couldn't help but smile, feeling inexplicably good in his heart. Although I don't know whether Garp and Kong value him so much because of his strength or because of other things, it is already very satisfying to Zhang Yang to be able to respect his choice so much. At this moment, Zhang Yang really had the idea of staying in marine all the time. However, such a marine is not what I want. Turning around, looking at the endless sea, Zhang Yang's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. First, let's start with marine at Sabayati Archipelago. Let me cut out the darkness. Chapter 57, Clearing the Lawless Zone. The warm sunlight penetrated through the gaps in the windows, and the tiny spots of light dotted the tidy room. In the room, a young man in white casual clothes sat cross-legged. His eyes were closed, his handsome face was filled with a calm look. A long knife with a hilt of dongfa shozi was placed on his legs, and there was a little sunshine. Under the light, the blade clearly shone with a biting cold light, but it gave people a very hot feeling. The room was quiet, except for the young boy's slight breathing and the faint cries coming from outside the window. Suddenly, the boy's brows wrinkled slightly, then slowly opened his eyes, looked down at the long knife on his leg, and sighed helplessly. Failed again. Zhang Yang murmured helplessly while holding the flowing blade like fire. It has been a week since he returned from the Holy Land Mariajoy. In the past week, apart from the necessary meals, toilets and daily spiritual power training, Zhang Yang has basically been doing one thing, that is, sword meditation. The purpose, of course, is to fully master Shikai. Shikai is indispensable to the current Zhang Yang, but the current Zhang Yang does not even know when he completely masters Shikai, even when Shikai will suddenly be lifted. It is only through the sword meditation to obtain the approval of the fire. It's just that Zhang Yang has been practicing sword meditation every day for the past week, trying to enter the inner world to get the initial recognition of the fire. But every time he encounters the same situation as the sword meditation on the boat last time, he can only enter that area. The inner world of the dense fog was then driven out by the endless flames of Lu Ren Ruohuo. The only thing I got was the 3 words that Lu Ren Ruohuo kept repeating, not enough. This made Zhang Yang very puzzled, and he wanted to ask what Lu Ren Ruohuo meant, but he couldn't even see Lu Ren Ruohuo's face. Alas! He sighed helplessly again. Zhang Yang shook his head, took Lu Ren Ruohuo back into the scabbard, and then with a thought, Lu Ren Ruohuo returned to his sea of consciousness. He stood up and put on his shoes. Zhang Yang pushed open the window, looked at the colorful bubbles in the sky in the distance, and moved his somewhat stiff body. The weather is nice. Zhang Yang squinted his eyes and looked up at the blue sky, paused, and suddenly a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. What a great weather for work. Muttering in an inexplicable tone, Zhang Yang turned to pick up the broken water on the table, and then walked out of the room. Zhang Yang's current location is the highest and most central building in the branch base, which is the so-called headquarters. Vosk's office is on the top floor, while the area where Zhang Yang lives is on the next floor of the office. Walking out of the room, Zhang Yang went straight to Vosk's office, pushed the gate of opening and walked in. In the office, Vasek was looking down at something. When he saw Zhang Yang walking in, he quickly stood up. For Zhang Yang, now he can really be treated as a person of his own level or even higher. In his eyes, Zhang Yang was originally the most valued genius in the Marine headquarters, and some time ago, he even retreated from the battle with the Hades Rayleigh, and was received by the world government ruler Gorosei, 5 elders. This kind of person is destined to be people who want to stand on the top of the world, so in the face of Zhang Yang, Vasek's current attitude can be said to be really humble. Zhang Yang also knew about Vasek's thoughts, but he didn't say much, because Vasek's attitude was more suitable for his next series of actions. Major Zhang Yang, what's the matter? Vask asked politely. Well, I want to ask you for help with something. Zhang Yang nodded, glanced at Vask, then paused and said, I want to gain command over here. Command. Vasek was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and smiled. Major Zhang Yang, you mustn't have forgotten it, right? When Marshal Kong sent you here, he already gave you the command of this place, but you didn't want to ask for it. That's all. If you want to now, I can give you the command anytime. Then I'll trouble you, Boss and Rear Admiral. Zhang Yang chuckled. There's nothing to be thankful for. Speaking of which, you're just taking back what was originally yours. Vasek waved his hand, then looked at Zhang Yang strangely and said, speaking of which, Major Zhang Yang, aren't you too troublesome and don't want the command here? Why did you suddenly change your mind? Because I need to employ people. Zhang Yang said without any concealment. Employer. Vas looked at Zhang Yang in confusion. He didn't understand what Zhang Yang meant. Zhang Yang didn't answer Vasek's question, glanced at Vasek, and suddenly asked, Vasek Rear Admiral, what do you think of the current Marine? Hearing this, Vasek couldn't help frowning. He suddenly felt that today's publicity was a bit strange. Major Zhang Yang, why do you want to ask this all of a sudden? Vasek asked with some doubts. Because I think there's something wrong with Marine right now. Zhang Yang looked at Vasek and said as if to himself, in the eyes of civilians, we Marine are heroes who maintain justice, destroy pirates, and protect them, but some time ago at 20 GR, do you know what I saw? What? Vas said subconsciously. A woman who is helpless. A hint of coldness flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes, and his voice was a little cold. A woman with no power to hold a chicken was just kidnapped by a group of pirates and sold in public, on this island managed by our Marine. But it's illegal there. Vasek frowned. That's not a reason. Zhang Yang looked at Vask coldly, stared into Vask's eyes and said, isn't Marine just there to maintain the order of the sea and protect civilians? On this island, it is clear that someone is being attacked by pirates. But nothing moves. Is this what Marine is supposed to do? Answer me, Vas, Rear Admiral. Listening to Zhang Yang's questioning and looking at Zhang Yang's cold eyes, Vas didn't know how to answer for a while, and there was a trace of confusion in his eyes. All along, he subconsciously regards the illegal zone as an area that does not belong to Marine's jurisdiction, so even if there are civilians injured there, he just regards it as a very normal thing, not just him, even in the eyes of everyone. This is a very normal thing. It seems that this has become the consensus of everyone since I do not know when. But now suddenly hearing Zhang Yang's questioning, he suddenly felt a little confused. Yes, don't Marines need to protect the civilians in the illegal zone? Seeing that there is such a large area of evil forces within Marine's jurisdiction but letting it go, is this really what Marine should do? There was a trace of struggle in his eyes, and after a while, Vask's eyes became firm, and he looked at Zhang Yang and said, I understand what you mean, Major Zhang Yang, what do you need me to do? Assemble the army. A gleam of light flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes. He turned his head to look out the window, and said coldly, from today onwards, there is no need for any illegal areas on Marine's territory. Vask's body was shocked, and he looked at Zhang Yang's back in disbelief. He understood what Zhang Yang meant. Zhang Yang wanted to clear the illegal areas on the island, so that there would be no more unstable areas on the island. It's just that Vasek has also been cleared. The illegal zone exists, not only because there is too much chaos there, and Marine simply doesn't have the energy to manage it, but more because it is an area that some people default to exist. I know what you're worried about. At this moment, Zhang Yang turned around and looked at the shocked Vask, as if he could see through his thoughts, and said lightly, if there is a problem with the government and Marine, I will solve it, you can do it with confidence. Hearing Zhang Yang's words, Vask's eyes flashed with a hint of hesitation, then he gritted his teeth and nodded. I understand, I'll go to assemble the army now. After speaking, Vask pushed the door and walked out. Snapped. The door was closed, and Zhang Yang was the only one left in the empty office. Huh. A chuckle suddenly came out of Zhang Yang's mouth. The icy expression on his face just now disappeared. He touched his nose, and Zhang Yang muttered to himself in a funny way, I didn't expect that I still have the talent to fool people. That's right, the cold eyes and the expression full of justice were all fake just now, but what he said was true. After returning from Mariajoy, Zhang Yang thought about it. Since he will stay in Marine in the future, he can't continue to let Marine develop like this. He wants to change Marine and let Marine develop according to his own ideas. Since he can't accept Marine the way of doing things, then let Marine accept his own way of doing things. And solving the illegal area on Sabayati Archipelago will be the first step for Jongyang to change Marine. Human trafficking by default. Whether you are Tenryubito or the government, I am in charge of my territory. A trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Jongyang tightened the water in his hand, and also pushed the door and walked out. Chapter 58. Operation Marine. The sky is still so blue, and the sun is still so vicious. For the sailors of the Sabayati Archipelago Marine Branch, today is another day as usual. It is time to patrol the patrol, to stand guard, and to go out to perform tasks. Carry out the mission, and everything seems to be the same as usual. For Quirrell, however, today was the most exciting day since he was born, because after 10 days of long waiting, this morning, his promotion to sergeant was finally announced. The long-cherished wish has finally come true. How can you keep Quirrell from getting excited? In addition to being excited, Quirrell was even more grateful to the new Major Jongyang, because he understood that he could become a sergeant entirely because he was lucky enough to meet Major Jongyang. Otherwise, even if he was poor in his life, he would never there is such a day. At the same time, Quirrell also deeply felt the strength of Major Jongyang. Just by finding Major Jongyang, Vossen Rear Admiral directly promoted him to the highest sergeant in his authority, and the appointment was issued so quickly. Major Jongyang was in Vossen Rear Admiral's mind. And no. With such a dazzling genius, Quirrell had a hunch that Major Jongyang's future achievements would surely shock everyone. As he walked towards the training ground, Quirrell thought to himself. Suddenly. Drip drip drip. The loud signal sound suddenly echoed over the entire base and spread to every corner of the base. After all, the Marines were stunned for a moment, except for the necessary garrisoned Marines. Whether they were patrolling, training or doing anything else, all the sailors ran neatly towards the square facing the gate of the base. Assembly signal. Quirrell was also stunned for a moment, then quickly followed the crowd to the square. It's Quirrell, the guy's here. In the square, a large number of Marines were constantly gathering, including Quirrell's companions in the formation. When they saw Quirrell running over, they all looked at Quirrell with envious expressions. Obviously, they also knew that from Quirrell is now a sergeant, much higher than them. But, who can blame it? Who made Quirrell work hard when they just wanted to be lazy? Messi, Nejira. Quirrell didn't think as much as they did. He said hello to his companions, and then stood in the second position of their formation. The higher the position, the higher the position. Hey, if I had known that I would be there to investigate for a while, maybe I could become a sergeant. Seeing this, the others suddenly looked envious and regretful. Becoming an officer not only represents an increase in status, but also an honor, but they are no longer enviable. And while these Marines were envious of Quirrell, the Marines continued to gather. Less than 10 minutes later, the Marines, with 5,000 or 6,000 people lined up neatly, gathered in the square. The scene was even spectacular. Voss Graham Rear Admiral is coming. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the crowd, and the Marine formation suddenly quieted down. One by one, they looked at Voss, who was walking in front of the square. Carlo also looked at him, but soon, Carlo's eyes lit up, and he looked towards Voss. It was the Jongyang who walked beside Voss. The other sailors naturally recognized Jongyang. How could they not know this young major who had been making big troubles one after another and didn't wear military uniforms very much? It's just that all the seamen, including Quirrell, were a little puzzled. They gathered suddenly, and brought Major Jongyang over there. Is this an announcement? At this time, Vossik and Jongyang also came to the front of the army. Jongyang stood beside Vosk with a broken water face in one hand, looked at the large number of Marines in front of him, and nodded lightly at Vosk. Seeing Jongyang nodding, Vossik also nodded, then took a step forward, looked at the quiet Marines in front of him, cleared his throat and said loudly, "All formation captains come out, report the number. Yes. Lieutenants wearing coats with the word, Justice, walked out one by one, and then began to report the number of people. The first raid formation should have reached 1,000 people, but actually 500 people. The report is complete. The second raid formation should have 1,000 people, but actually 500 people. The report is complete. The third artillery formation should have 800 people, but actually 400 people. The report is complete. The fourth sniper formation. Back to the team. Vasek nodded, then asked the formation leader to return to the team, turned to Zhang Yang and whispered, the Sabayati Archipelago branch has a total of 12,000 Marines, but due to the need to leave manpower on each GR to maintain law and order, excluding the number of guards at the base, there are still 5,600 people here. Quote. Enough. Zhang Yang said with satisfaction as he looked at the imposing Marine in front of him. In that case. Vasek nodded, turned his head to look at the Marines, and said loudly again, to call you today, there is an important announcement to announce that from now on, Major Zhang Yang will take over from me to command you. Is there any problem? No. The Marines suddenly shouted in unison. The duty of the Marines is to obey orders, although they do not understand why Vasek suddenly handed over the command to Zhang Yang, but this has no effect on them. On the contrary, Carlo was a little excited, and his intuition told him that Zhang Yang wanted to take over their command so suddenly. He was definitely going to do something big. Major Zhang Yang, tell me now. Seeing the reactions of the Marines, Vas moved away and said to the crowd on the side. Zhang Yang nodded, walked in front of the Marines, paused, the spiritual pressure on his body suddenly spewed out, the white clothes and hair suddenly had no wind, and a wave of air spread with Zhang Yang as the center, a kind of extremely depressed, the breath that people can't help but tremble over instantly enveloped the entire square, causing all the Marines to stop breathing abruptly, looking at Zhang Yang in horror. This is. Vasek also looked at Zhang Yang in shock. Although he was much stronger than those Marines, he could still feel a little uncomfortable under this breath. Looking at the expressions of the sailors, Zhang Yang also withdrew the spiritual pressure in a timely manner, and a little shock was enough, but if it was too much, it would be counterproductive. I won't introduce myself, but before I get down to business, I have a question for you. Zhang Yang said calmly. The field was quiet. Everyone was shocked by the spiritual pressure that broke out just now. They didn't know what it was, but they only knew that it was best not to interrupt Zhang Yang. Seeing the performance of the Marines, Zhang Yang nodded and continued, in your opinion, what is the existence of the illegal zone? Hearing this, the Marines were stunned for a moment. One by one you looked at me and I looked at you, for a while. A place where pirates and human traffickers are rampant. A sailor asked tentatively. What else? Zhang Yang nodded as usual. Where our Marines see and control. Shouted another Marine. What else? Zhang Yang glanced at the sailor. A place absolutely forbidden for civilians. What else? Dark, evil place. What else? One view after another was said by the sailors, but Zhang Yang's face remained unchanged, and kept repeating, then what? It's where Marines should be ashamed. Suddenly, a Marine shouted, the surroundings fell silent, and all the Marines looked at him. Oh! A flash of surprise flashed in Zhang Yang's eyes, and he looked at the sailor and said, why do you say that? Because. Hearing the words, the sailor hesitated, gritted his teeth and said, because it is our Marine's duty to protect civilians because of the elimination of evil forces, but under the management of Marine, Sabayati Archipelago still has a lawless zone, which makes civilians terrified. Place, I think it's a disgrace to Marine. The sailors shouted loudly, and the other sailors suddenly couldn't help being silent. Good. The corner of Zhang Yang's mouth showed a smile. It seems that Marine is not really the kind of ignorant people who are completely brainwashed. Sea soldier, tell me your name. Zhang Yang said, staring at the sea soldier. Report Major, my name is Querelle. Sailor, Querelle said excitedly. Okay, I remember you, you are a real sailor. Zhang Yang said earnestly, then looked at the other sailors, and said solemnly, "I don't know what other people think, and I don't care what Marine did in the past, but in my opinion, there is no reason for Marine to let it go. The reason why civilians are harmed, the lawless zone has exceeded my tolerance limit, and now, if you still consider yourself a Marine, just follow." Quote. After speaking, Zhang Yang turned around and walked outside the base. Stared blankly at Zhang Yang's back. After a while, they all shouted and followed. Looking at this scene, Vasek couldn't help feeling a little shocked, and murmured, "Sure enough, the expressions of the sailors have changed." Chapter 59. All-round offensive. When did the illegal zone start to form, and how long it has been formed? No one remembers this, and no one will pursue it, but in almost everyone's consensus, the existence of the illegal zone seems to be natural. Even most Marines think so. This is also one of the reasons why Zhang Yang can't stand the current Marine. Therefore, he wants to change the current Marine. Although Zhang Yang is not a good person, he can't stand Marine's behavior. So in the first step, Zhang Yang chose to take the illegally brought Sabayati archipelago to open the operation. Stomping on. On the way from 63GR to the illegal zone, the neat footsteps attracted the attention of countless people. Businessmen, civilians, tourists, or pirates in disguise could not help but listen to the work in their hands, turned their heads to look, and saw only the street at the end. A huge number of Marines lined up neatly and walked over with neat footsteps. So many Marines. What's going on here? All the people backed away to give way to both sides of the street, watching the Marines running neatly in front of them with puzzled faces, wondering what happened, and the pirates hiding in the crowd were also frightened for a while. If not seeing that Marine ignored them at all, I'm afraid they would have turned around and ran away in fright. Could it be that some ferocious big pirate is coming? Looking at Marine who kept running past in front of her, a woman with a beautiful face couldn't help but said a little scared. Yeah, shouldn't it? It's also possible that Marine is performing some kind of mission, right? The people around were also a little scared, and a man pretended to be calm. Who knows? Anyway, it's better not to run around these days. An uncle frowned, and the others nodded in agreement. In the crowd, listening to the surrounding voices of fear or doubt, and glanced at the Marine team that kept running by, a middle-aged man wearing glasses flashed a gleam in his eyes, opened the notebook and held it on it excitedly. Right up. His name is Adong, and he is a professional journalist. When he encounters this kind of scene, he thinks differently from other people who are afraid. Years of professional experience tell him that Marine is absolutely going to do such a large-scale operation. As long as he can, figuring out what exactly Marine was up to would definitely be big news. While thinking about it, Idong excitedly wrote the current situation in his notebook, and then raised his head, only to find that the long Marine team had passed the street and was leaving, and behind the Marine team, there was still a long way to go. More than a dozen people followed, and with Idong's eyes, it was obvious that those guys were definitely also reporters. Damn, I can't be preempted by them. Idong suddenly cursed secretly, quickly put away the notebook, and also chased after him. However, no one noticed that above the height of Sabayati archipelago, a slender figure stood out of thin air, quietly watching the situation below. Standing a few hundred meters above Sabayati archipelago out of thin air, the cool wind with a slight fishy smell was blowing the placket and broken hair. Zhang Yang held the broken water and looked at the dozen figures on the ground following the Marine team, frowned, and then stretched out again. Although Zhang Yang didn't go on, he almost guessed the identities of those reporters. It was normal for so many Marines to act together to attract their attention, and Zhang Yang didn't care. Anyway, he didn't plan to hide it. Go. But this feeling is a bit mysterious. Zhang Yang murmured, I don't know if it was because the captain was in charge of the whole army before. With the memory of the captain, Zhang Yang found that he always had an inexplicable sense of familiarity when giving orders to those Marines, and his thoughts would also become extraordinarily clear. Is this the so-called natural leader? Zhang Yang thought a little narcissistically, and then he couldn't help but laugh a little, shook his head, and waited for Marine to reach the lawless zone. Since this time Marine took the shortest straight route, and the speed was not slow. Only half an hour later, a total of 5,600 Marines reached the bridge from 59 GR to 1 GR, and restarted under the instructions of Voss. Line up. Seeing this, the corners of his mouth were raised, his feet moved, and he shot them straight from the air, landing safely in front of them under the amazed eyes of Voss and the seamen. Vossick knew that Zhang Yang ate the Paramesha fantasy fruit, so although he was shocked that Zhang Yang flew over, he accepted it quickly, but those sailors couldn't do it. They only knew about Zhang Yang's major from the headquarters. It's a super genius at the headquarters, good relationship with Garp and other vice admirals, these, and now they suddenly see Zhang Yang flying over. How can they not be shocked? They have never seen anyone who can fly. Everything is ready to act at any time, Vossick told Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang nodded, then suddenly raised his right hand to point to a bush on the right, and said without looking at it, "The fourth white thunder." Crackle. A white pillar of thunder shot out from Zhang Yang's fingertips and directly slid into the grass. The next moment, a scream came out, and a big man rolled out of the grass with a scream, his right hand covering his shoulder, and scarlet blood continued to flow out. Voss was stunned for a moment, then his face turned cold, and he suddenly understood. In this illegal zone, there are pirates, traffickers and other villains everywhere. Basically, no ordinary people dare to live here. Even in the area between 59 GR and 1 GR, there are few ordinary people. And this big man was hiding in the grass just now. His purpose can be imagined. I am afraid that the wicked people in the illegal zone already know that Marine is coming to attack them. Arrest him. Vossick shouted coldly, and a sailor immediately stepped out to control it. Major Zhang Yang, I'm afraid the wicked people in the lawless zone have already known our actions. What will we do next? Voss asked Zhang Yang with a frown. Hearing this, Zhang Yang didn't answer immediately, and looked at 1 GR across the bridge. A sneer suddenly appeared on his face. According to the original plan, a blanket search was carried out directly. Once it is discovered that both pirates and human traffickers are found, they will be arrested first. If there is any resistance, they will all be killed. Zhang Yang said coldly, the people living in the illegal zone are all vicious people, and there is absolutely no need to show mercy to these people. Understood. Voss nodded, then turned around, waved his hand and said loudly, the first formation, the second formation attacked as the advance force, the third formation, the fourth formation, and the fifth formation carried out long-range auxiliary attacks, and other formations supported at any time. Now, we will carry out a carpet annihilation operation against 1 GR, whoever surrenders, and whoever resists will be killed. Let's start the action. Quote. Oh. The Marines immediately raised their voices and let out a sky-shattering shout, rushing towards 1 GR through the stone bridge. Let's go too. Zhang Yang glanced at a dozen figures 100 meters away behind him, and after saying this to Voss, he walked in behind the sailors, and Voss followed closely. After a while, the 1 GR heard gunshots and shouts. Click. Pressing the camera in his hand, Idong looked at Zhang Yang with a sneering face in the photo and the sailors who ran past him. Because he was too excited, the hand holding the photo was a little excited. Big news. This is big news. Marine is going to attack the lawless zone. Chapter 60 is all sent to impel down. This is a place that seems to be forgotten by the world. It is only separated by a wall. The outside of the wall is bright and colorful, but the inside is dark and cold. People with numb eyes are locked in chains with their hands and feet in the cell. A stark ironic contrast. Bang! Suddenly, the iron gate of the confinement was violently pushed open, and a little girl in her teens cried and was violently thrown in by a big man, fell to the ground and let out a painful moan, and got up shivering. She used to be cute. His little face was full of tears and fear. The people in the cell raised their heads and glanced numbly, and then returned to a dead silence. Bah, damn it, you dare to bite me. Behind the big man, a man in a white suit with an extremely ugly appearance walked over to the little girl, covering his wrists and scolding, and kicked the little girl fiercely. Because of the pain and wrinkled into a ball, tears kept streaming down, but he didn't dare to cry. Because she knew that as long as she cried, this person would beat her hard. HMPH, count you acquainted. Seeing that the little girl was in pain but didn't dare to speak out, the man in the suit showed a disgusting smile, and said to the big man behind him, "Get her up for me, and I'll put it on her myself." Slave collar. Yes. The big man nodded expressionlessly, then walked over to the little girl, who suddenly whimpered and shook her head and kept backing away, her face full of fear. Bang! Suddenly, the iron door was violently kicked open again, and a thin man ran in with a look of panic. After seeing the man in a suit, he shouted in panic, "Boss, it's not good, Marine is here. There are a lot of Marines coming. Brothers can't stop." Boom! Before the thin man could finish speaking, a blood flower suddenly exploded on his forehead, his body shook, and then he fell straight down. Immediately afterwards, a sailor ran over and kicked the thin man's corpse, then turned around and said, "Major Zhang Yang, it has been resolved." Just as he was talking, the sea soldier suddenly noticed something, turned his head again, and saw the dazed man in a suit, the big man, the little girl who fell on the ground, and the people in the cell. Human traffickers. The sea soldier's face changed greatly, the gun in his hand pointed directly at the man in the suit and the big man, and coldly shouted, "Don't move." Damn, how did Marine come here? At this time, the man in the suit also reacted. Looking at the sailor who pointed a gun at him, he suddenly scolded in a low voice, full of confusion and anger. Marine and the government acquiesced to their actions all along. Why did Marine suddenly come this time? Hateful. Thinking like this, the man in the suit glanced at the sea soldier, a haze flashed in his eyes, and said coldly to the big man beside him, "Kill him and get rid of all the Marines outside." Yes. The big man agreed with a blank expression, and then stepped on his feet, leaving countless cracks on the ground, and the whole person shot out and rushed towards the sea soldiers. "Stop! Don't move!" The sea soldier's face suddenly changed greatly, and he was about to press the trigger to shoot, but found that the big man was less than 2 meters away from him, and punched him with an expressionless punch. Hateful. A trace of unwillingness flashed in the sea soldier's eyes, and when he saw that his fist was about to hit him, a flash of white suddenly flashed in front of him. Bang! The face of the big man who raised his fist suddenly changed greatly, because he found out that a boy who looked about 14 years old suddenly appeared in front of him, holding a delicate long knife in one hand, and inserted a knife in the other. In his trouser pocket, one foot lifted up and kicked his lower abdomen. Next moment. Wow! The big man opened his mouth sharply and coughed out a mouthful of blood, only to feel that the internal organs in his body were rolling and deforming, and the whole person flew out, shot past the man in the suit with a sneer on his face, and slammed into the wall. Boom! The big man slammed into the wall in a large font, and immediately left countless cracks on the wall. The whole person seemed to be stuck to the wall, and it took a while to roll his eyes and fall down. The sudden scene made the sea soldiers stunned for a moment, and then looked at the boy who was shorter than him in front of him, and immediately said with admiration, "Major Zhang Yang." The young man, that is, Zhang Yang, nodded casually, glanced at the big man who fell to the ground and the man in a suit with a sluggish face, and then looked at the little girl who was staring at him blankly on the ground and the surrounding cells who were not numb or afraid. The people who stared at him with confidence, finally looked at the dull-looking man in a suit again, and his face instantly turned cold. Seeing Zhang Yang's icy gaze, the man in the suit woke up like a dream, turned his head stiffly and glanced at the big man who didn't know whether to live or die. His face turned pale with fright. "No, you broke the rules. Marine shouldn't be in charge of these things." The man in the suit looked back at Zhang Yang in panic. "Rules?" Zhang Yang's face became even colder, and he held the handle of the broken water in one hand and disappeared instantly. Puff! The blood splashed. Zhang Yang's figure suddenly appeared with his back to the man in the suit. He took the broken water that was not stained with blood back into the scabbard, and sneered, "In my territory, I have the final say in the rules." "Ah! The man in the suit looked down at the bloody stab wound on his chest and wanted to say something, but in the end he could only fall down weakly. Zhang Yang didn't even look at the corpse of the man in the suit. He walked up to the stunned little girl, squatted down and hugged her in his arms, and said softly, "Don't worry. It's all right." The little girl leaned against Zhang Yang's chest in a daze, and when she heard Zhang Yang's gentle voice, she couldn't help crying, but she was crying and fainted in front of her eyes. Zhang Yang silently picked up the fainted little girl and said without looking back, "Let them all go." After speaking, Zhang Yang walked out with the little girl in his arms. After being stunned for a moment, the sea soldier suddenly reacted, found the key from the man in the suit, and walked to the cell. Zhang Yang walked through the long corridor with the little girl and came outside. After looking at the situation outside, his originally cold face suddenly eased. The one who just entered was a 3-story slave house, and outside, there was a wide lawn. At this time, there were nearly 1,000 people lined up on the lawn, with the sailors pointing their guns at the situation. Kneeling on the ground, it looks extraordinarily spectacular. "Major Zhang Yang, who are you?" Seeing Zhang Yang walking out with a little girl in his arms, Vasek walked over and said strangely, "It's a slave house." Zhang Yang said with a cold face, and then motioned for a sailor to come over and hand the little girl into his hands. "What? Slave house?" Vasker's face suddenly turned cold. Although he knew that it was normal to illegally traffic people, he couldn't help being angry until he saw with his own eyes that such a small girl was actually a slave. "The slaves inside have already been released. How is the situation now?" He glanced at Vasek, who seemed to be very angry, and Zhang Yang turned his head to look at the kneeling pirates, human traffickers and other villains. "The villains found by 1GR to 8GR are all here, and the others either resisted fiercely and were killed or fled." Vask said a little unwillingly. "I didn't pay attention to it before, so I don't know, but now that I have seen it with my own eyes, he knows what kind of people are in the illegal zone." To put it bluntly, the moment he saw those scumbags, he had a kind of direct solution. Their impulses. Is it? Zhang Yang glanced at the unwilling Vasek, and knew what he was thinking, not to mention Vasek, what he had seen and heard since the start of the attack, even made him want to kill these scumbags. What to do with these people? Vask continued. Hearing this, Zhang Yang glanced at the wicked people kneeling on the ground in a row, and sneered. "Send it all to impel down."